As the quietude of this moment settles around you, we begin a gentle journey, a slow drift through the annals of ancient history. Tonight, we will explore the intricate tapestry of a life that profoundly shaped the world, a narrative whispered across centuries. Our subject is Gaius Julius Caesar, a name synonymous with power, ambition, and transformation in the Roman Republic. This is not a tale for hurried listening, nor for sharp focus. Instead, it is offered as a tranquil companion, a steady current upon which your mind may softly float. Allow the quiet unfolding of events, the measured recitation of facts, and the calm cadence of history to guide you towards a state of profound rest. There is no need to grasp every detail, no expectation of retaining every date or name. Simply allow the story to wash over you, a soothing balm for the mind. Imagine a distant time, a civilization of marble and might, of legions and laws. Our purpose is to illuminate the path of one man within that grand panorama, tracing his earliest days, his rise through the political machinations of Rome, his military conquests that spanned vast territories, and the ultimate culmination of his extraordinary existence. Each chapter will unfold deliberately, a sequence of historical moments presented with a quiet reverence for accuracy and a deep understanding of their enduring significance. Let your breathing deepen, your muscles soften, and your thoughts begin to quiet. As the narrative progresses, you're invited to release the day's concerns and surrender to the slow rhythm of the past. The echoes of ancient Rome, the movements of great figures, and the sweep of human endeavour will form a backdrop for your peaceful descent into slumber. Welcome to this quiet contemplation, a historical passage designed to lull you gently into the embrace of a restful night. Before we delve into the singular life of Julius Caesar, let us first softly transport ourselves to the world into which he was born. Imagine, if you will, the city of Rome, not as it stands today, but as a vibrant, sprawling metropolis of the ancient world. Picture its 7 hills, crowned with temples and grand public buildings, constructed from travertine and marble, glistening under the Mediterranean sun. The air itself might have carried the scent of baking bread, the distant murmur of countless voices, and the faint, ever-present aroma of hearth fires. This was a city of profound contrasts, immense wealth alongside stark poverty, sophisticated legal systems intertwined with ruthless political manoeuvring. At its heart lay the Roman Forum, a bustling expanse of public life where senators debated, merchants traded, and citizens gathered. Here the very foundations of the Republic were debated and decided. The Republic itself was a complex entity, a system of governance that had evolved over centuries, priding itself on its traditions, its laws, and the participation of its free citizens. Yet, beneath this veneer of order and grandeur, currents of ambition ran deep and strong. For a Roman aristocrat, the pursuit of dignitas, a sense of worth and prestige, and glory achieved through public service and military success, was a driving force. The path to influence was arduous, requiring strategic alliances, eloquent oratory, and often military prowess. Families, or gentes, held immense sway, their reputations stretching back generations, their names interwoven with the very fabric of Rome's history. The legions, Rome's formidable military, stood as both a protector of the Republic and a potential instrument of individual power. Commanders who led these legions to victory gained immense popularity and a loyalty that could sometimes rival their allegiance to the state itself. This delicate balance between the strength of the Republic's institutions and the personal power of its leading citizens created an environment ripe for both unparalleled achievement and profound instability. It was into this intricate, dynamic, and often tumultuous world that Julius Caesar would arrive, and destined to navigate its complexities and ultimately to reshape its very essence. Allow these images of ancient Rome to gently form in your mind, providing a quiet backdrop for the narrative that now unfolds. Within the bustling, ambitious city we have just gently explored, a new life began. In the year 100 BCE, according to most accounts, Gaius Julius Caesar was born. His birth occurred into a Rome that, while grand, was also on the cusp of significant internal strife, though the precise tremors of these coming upheavals would not be fully felt for some years. Caesar belonged to one of Rome's most ancient and distinguished families, the gens Julia. This was a patrician clan, meaning they were among the oldest and most aristocratic families in Rome, tracing their lineage back to the very foundation of the city. Such a birth conferred immediate status and a certain expectation of future eminence. Yet, at the time of Caesar's arrival, the Julia were not at the absolute pinnacle of Roman power. They possessed a venerable name, certainly, but their recent history had seen a slight dimming of their direct political influence compared to some other prominent families. They were respected, but perhaps not feared in the way some of the truly dominant factions of the late Republic were. Despite this relative quietude in recent generations, the significance of the gens Julia's lineage was immense. They proudly claimed descent from Julius, also known as Ascanius, the son of the legendary Trojan hero Aeneas. And Aeneas himself in Roman mythology was believed to be the son of the goddess Venus. This divine connection was not merely a poetic flourish. It was a deeply held belief that imbued the family with a unique aura, suggesting a destiny touched by the gods themselves. For any Roman, a connection to such illustrious figures was a powerful source of pride and a potent tool in the intricate world of Roman politics and public perception. This patrician birth, while carrying the weight of ancient tradition and divine association, also placed certain obligations upon young Caesar. He was expected to uphold the family name, to strive for public office, and to contribute to the glory of Rome. His early life, therefore, would be shaped by these inherited expectations and the deeply ingrained values of the Roman aristocracy. It was a dawn filled with the quiet promise of a prestigious future, yet one that would ultimately transcend the conventional paths laid out for even the most noble of Roman sons. This ancient lineage, therefore, forms a subtle, foundational thread in the tapestry of his remarkable life, a thread we will now gently follow. As the young Julius Caesar grew within the walls of his family home, his early years unfolded much like those of other Roman noble children, albeit with the subtle undercurrent of his family's distinguished ancient heritage. His childhood was not marked by dramatic events, but rather by the steady rhythm of Roman aristocratic custom and education, designed to cultivate the virtues expected of a future leader. His earliest instruction would have been provided at home, likely by his mother Aurelia Cotta, a woman remembered for her intelligence and strict moral character. From her, he would have absorbed the foundational principles of Roman piety, respect for tradition, and the importance of family honour. This initial domestic tutelage would have laid the groundwork for his later, more formal studies. As he matured slightly, the focus of his education would broaden considerably. A Roman noble child was expected to be well versed in both intellectual pursuits and physical prowess. Thus, Caesar would have engaged in a comprehensive curriculum. He would have studied Latin and Greek, the two essential languages of the educated Roman elite. Rhetoric, the art of persuasive public speaking, was paramount, as it was the primary tool for success in the Roman Forum and Senate. He would have learned history, particularly the deeds of great Romans, as a source of inspiration and moral instruction. Philosophy, especially Stoicism and Epicureanism, would also have been introduced, shaping his understanding of ethics and the world. Alongside these academic endeavours, physical training was integral. Young patricians were expected to be robust and capable. Caesar would have participated in activities such as riding, swimming, and various forms of combat training, preparing his body for the rigours of military service and the demands of public life. These exercises were not merely for health. They instilled discipline, courage, and resilience, qualities essential for a Roman commander or statesman. Beyond formal lessons, Caesar's childhood would have offered a quiet exposure to public life. Though not directly participating, he would have observed his father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, performing his duties as a magistrate, attending public assemblies, and engaging in the intricate social rituals of Rome. These observations, though perhaps not fully understood by a child, would have subtly imprinted upon him the complex dynamics of Roman society, the importance of alliances, and the constant striving for influence. His early years, therefore, were characterized by this structured, purposeful development. There was a quiet dignity in this upbringing, a gradual shaping of a young mind and body within the established traditions of his venerable family and the broader expectations of Roman high society. It was a period of formation, a calm prelude to the so tumultuous decades that lay ahead, instilling the deep-seated Roman values that would, in time, be both upheld and profoundly challenged by the man he would become. Beyond the structured environment of his childhood education, young Julius Caesar was also shaped by the powerful currents of Roman politics that flowed through his own family. The gens, Julia, while ancient and patrician, found itself aligned with a particular political orientation, one that would significantly influence Caesar's early life and future trajectory. A crucial connection within his family was through his aunt Julia, his father's sister. She was married to Gaius Marius, a figure of immense renown and controversy in late Republican Rome. Marius was a celebrated general, famed for his military reforms and his multiple consulships. More significantly for Caesar's family, Marius was a prominent leader of the Popularis faction. To understand the political landscape into which Caesar was born, it is helpful to gently consider the two main, informal political groupings of the late Roman Republic, the Populares and the Optimates. These were not formal political parties in the modern sense, with strict memberships or manifestos. Instead, they represented differing approaches to governance and different bases of support within the Roman aristocracy. The Populares, whose name derives from the Latin word for the people, generally advocated for policies that appealed to the broader Roman citizenry and the plebeian classes. They often sought to pass laws through the popular assemblies, sometimes bypassing the Senate, and championed causes such as land reform, grain distributions, or extending Roman citizenship. Their leaders frequently rose to prominence through military success, or by cultivating support among the common people, sometimes challenging the traditional authority of the established senatorial elite. Gaius Marius was a quintessential example of a Populares leader, drawing immense popularity from his military victories and his willingness to confront the senatorial establishment. On the other side stood the Optimates, meaning the best men. This faction generally represented the interests of the conservative senatorial aristocracy. They emphasized the authority of the Senate, tradition, and the established order. Optimates believed that the Republic was best governed by the experienced and wealthy elite, and they often resisted proposals that might diminish senatorial power or redistribute wealth and land. They viewed the Populares' appeals to the masses with suspicion, seeing them as demagogic and potentially destabilizing to the Republic. And Caesar's family, through the marriage of his Aunt Julia to Marius, was therefore deeply embedded within the Populares camp. This connection would have meant that the political discussions within his household, the alliances formed, and the social circles frequented would have leaned towards this popular faction. While he was still a child during Marius's most influential years, The legacy of this alliance and the political climate it fostered would have permeated his formative environment. This foundational understanding of the populares and optimates is essential, for the tensions and conflicts between these two approaches would not only define much of the late Republic, but would also become the very stage upon which Julius Caesar would eventually play his own transformative role. His family ties thus provided him not only with a prestigious lineage, but also with a distinct political orientation from his earliest days. The presence of Gaius Marius, a towering figure in Roman public life, cast a significant shadow over young Julius Caesar's early years, a shadow that likely instilled profound lessons about power, ambition, and the unpredictable nature of political fortune. Marius was not merely an elder relative, he was a living legend, a celebrated general who had achieved unprecedented military victories against formidable foes such as the Numidian king Jugurtha and the migrating Germanic tribes of the Cimbri and Teutones. His military reforms, which opened the legions to landless citizens, fundamentally reshaped the Roman army, transforming it into a professional force loyal to its commander rather than solely to the state. Marius's political career was equally remarkable, marked by an astonishing 7 consulships, a feat unheard of in his time and one that openly challenged the traditional Roman cursus honorum, which favoured a more measured progression through public offices. Each consulship was a testament to his immense popularity and his ability to command the loyalty of the Roman populace. For a young Caesar growing up in a household where Marius was a revered figure, these achievements would have been a constant source of discussion and admiration. He would have heard tales of Marius's triumphs, his strategic brilliance, and his unwavering determination in the face of both foreign enemies and domestic political opposition. Such narratives, delivered by family members who were themselves deeply invested in Marius's success, would have painted a vivid picture of what a Roman citizen could achieve through talent, courage, and popular support. Yet Marius's career was not without its darker complexities and struggles. His later years were marred by intense political rivalries, violence, and civil strife, particularly in his clashes with his rival Sulla. These turbulent episodes, though perhaps not fully understood by a very young Caesar, would have demonstrated the brutal realities of Roman power politics. The rise and fall of great men, the shifting loyalties, and the ultimate necessity of wielding power decisively would have been implicit lessons. The very fact that Marius, a man of humble origins who had risen to such heights, frequently found himself in direct opposition to the conservative optimates, would have reinforced the populares ideology within Caesar's family. He would have observed, through the lens of his relatives, how an individual could challenge the entrenched aristocracy, how popular support could be harnessed, and how traditional norms could be bent or even broken in pursuit of political goals. Thus, the shadow of Marius was not merely that of a successful general, but of a man who redefined Roman political ambition. He showed that true power could reside not just in ancient lineage or senatorial decree, but also in military prowess and the unwavering support of the people. These were profound insights, absorbed by Caesar during his formative years, quietly shaping his understanding of what it meant to be a leader in Rome, and laying subtle groundwork for his own future aspirations and actions. As the young Julius Caesar was coming of age, Rome found itself engulfed in a period of intense internal conflict, a civil war that pitted 2 dominant figures against each other, his uncle, Gaius Marius, and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. This struggle was not merely a contest between ambitious individuals, but a profound ideological battle between the populares faction, championed by Marius, and the optimates, represented by Sulla, each vying for control over the Roman state and its future direction. The conflict ebbed and flowed with brutal swings of fortune. After Marius's death in 86 BCE, The populares maintained control of Rome for a time, but Sulla, a brilliant general himself, Decius was campaigning in the east. Upon his successful return he marched his legions on Rome, an act that had become disturbingly normalised since Marius's own similar actions years prior. Sulla's military might prove decisive, leading to his ultimate victory and the capture of the city. What followed was a dark chapter in Roman history, known as Sulla's Reign of Terror. Unlike previous political transitions, Sulla did not merely consolidate power, he sought to fundamentally restructure the Roman Republic and eliminate his political opponents with unprecedented brutality. He introduced the proscriptions, a system that publicly listed individuals deemed enemies of the state. These lists posted in the Forum were essentially death warrants. Anyone whose name appeared on a proscription list could be legally killed by any citizen, or and their property confiscated and sold, with a portion of the proceeds going to the informer. This period plunged Rome into an atmosphere of profound fear and pervasive instability. No one felt entirely safe, particularly those with real or perceived ties to the popularis faction. Friends and neighbours turned on one another, driven by greed, fear, or old grievances. The rule of law seemed to dissolve, replaced by the arbitrary will of the dictator. Homes were raided, families shattered, and the social fabric of the city was severely strained. For a young man like Caesar, who was closely related to Marius and had family members deeply embedded in the popularis cause, this era would have been a chilling education in the extreme consequences of political defeat. He would have witnessed firsthand the summary executions, and the public auctions of confiscated estates, and the constant apprehension that permeated daily life. The air itself was thick with suspicion. Sulla's actions were intended to solidify the power of the Optimates and prevent any resurgence of popularis influence. He also enacted sweeping constitutional reforms designed to strengthen the Senate and weaken the tribunes of the plebs, thereby curbing the power of popular assemblies. But the lasting legacy of his reign was not just the reordering of the state, but the demonstration of how ruthlessly power could be seized and maintained, and the devastating human cost of civil war. This period of intense fear and political instability undeniably shaped Caesar's understanding of leadership, ambition, and the precarious nature of life in the Roman Republic. In the shadow of Sulla's ascendant power and the chilling proscriptions, a direct challenge was issued to the young Julius Caesar. Sulla, in his systematic dismantling of all opposition and the purging of those connected to the Marian faction, turned his attention to Caesar. He demanded that Caesar divorce his wife Cornelia. This was not a personal slight, but a calculated political maneuver. Cornelia was the daughter of Lucius Cornelius Cinna, a prominent Marian supporter who had held the consulship multiple times and had been a formidable adversary to Sulla. A divorce would sever Caesar's significant family ties to the populares, weakening his standing within that faction and signalling his submission to Sulla's new order. Such a demand from the most powerful man in Rome was not easily ignored. Many ambitious young men, facing similar pressure, would have capitulated, understanding that their very lives and the lives of their families hung in the balance. To defy Sulla was to invite certain danger, potentially even death. The atmosphere of terror was pervasive, and the consequences of disobedience were clear to all. Yet Julius Caesar, still in his late teens, chose defiance. He refused Sulla's command to divorce Cornelia. This was a remarkable act of courage and conviction for a young man in such a perilous position. His refusal was not a quiet, private decision, but a public rejection of the dictator's authority, an open challenge to the man who held absolute power over Rome. It demonstrated an early strength of character, a refusal to abandon his loyalties or compromise his personal integrity, even when confronted with overwhelming force. And this act of defiance immediately placed Caesar in grave danger. His name was consequently added to the proscription lists, marking him as an enemy of the state. Suddenly, the comfort and security of his aristocratic upbringing were stripped away. He became a fugitive, forced to flee Rome to avoid capture and execution. This sudden transition from the protected life of a noble youth to that of an outlaw must have been a profoundly jarring experience. Caesar found himself hiding in the remote Sabine country, constantly moving, relying on the goodwill of friends and family who dared to offer him refuge. Each day brought the threat of discovery, the fear of betrayal. He was a hunted man, living on the margins of the very society he was born to lead. This period of flight and hiding was a harsh apprenticeship in survival, teaching him resourcefulness, caution, and perhaps a deeper understanding of human loyalty and treachery. Despite the immediate danger, Caesar's refusal to divorce Cornelia solidified his reputation among the populares. It marked him as a man of principle, unwilling to bend to tyranny, even at great personal cost. This early test forged his resilience and demonstrated an unwavering commitment to his alliances. It was a clear indication of the formidable will that would later define his extraordinary career. His decision, born of conviction, set him on a path that would require both great courage and strategic cunning to navigate the treacherous currents of Roman politics. Forced into exile by Sulla's proscription, the young Julius Caesar did not languish in idleness. Instead, he sought purpose and experience beyond the immediate reach of Roman political intrigue. He journeyed eastward to the Roman provinces of Asia and Cilicia, where he found an opportunity to serve in the military. This period offered him a practical education far removed from the theoretical lessons of his youth. His early military service began under the command of Marcus Minucius Thermus, the governor of Asia. Here, Caesar would have engaged in the daily routines of a Roman soldier, learning the discipline and practicalities of legionary life. He participated in various campaigns and skirmishes, experiencing firsthand the realities of warfare. One notable moment involved the siege of Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos, which had sided with Mithridates VI of Pontus against Rome. During this siege, Caesar distinguished himself, earning the civic crown, a high military honour awarded for saving the life of a Roman citizen in battle. This early commendation indicated his courage and tactical awareness, even as a young officer. Following his service in Asia, Caesar moved to Cilicia, where he served under Servilius Isauricus, who was campaigning against pirates in the region. These encounters with the persistent threat of piracy would have provided further opportunities to develop his military acumen and leadership skills in a different operational environment. The eastern provinces offered a dynamic training ground, exposing him to diverse cultures and the logistical challenges of maintaining Roman authority far from the capital. Beyond his military duties, Caesar understood the importance of continued intellectual growth. Even in exile, his ambition to excel, not just on the battlefield but also in the forum, remained. He dedicated himself to the study of rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, which was an essential skill for any aspiring Roman politician. He travelled to Rhodes, a renowned centre for rhetorical education, to study under Apollonius Molon. Apollonius was a celebrated teacher who had also instructed Cicero, Rome's greatest orator. Under Molon's guidance, Caesar refined his public speaking abilities, honing his voice, developing his arguments, and mastering the techniques of captivating an audience. This intellectual pursuit was not merely academic, it was a strategic investment in his future, recognizing that military prowess alone would not secure his political ascendancy in Rome. This period of exile and education was transformative. It broadened his horizons, instilled practical military experience, and sharpened his intellect. far from Rome, he was shaping himself into a more formidable figure, preparing for the day he could safely return and re-enter the tumultuous arena of Roman public life. During his return journey from Rhodes, where he had been studying rhetoric, Julius Caesar embarked upon a fateful sea voyage across the Aegean. The waters of the eastern Mediterranean were, at this time, infested with pirates, a persistent nuisance and a serious threat to Roman shipping and travellers. It was during this passage that Caesar's ship was intercepted by Cilician pirates. He and his retinue were captured, and he was taken prisoner to the island of Pharmacusa, near Miletus. Far from displaying fear or despair, the young Caesar exhibited a remarkable degree of composure and even disdain for his captors. When the pirates informed him of their ransom demand, which they set at 20 talents of silver, Caesar reportedly laughed. He found the sum insulting, believing it to be far too low for a man of his standing and potential. He insisted that they demand at least 50 talents, a sum more befitting a Roman aristocrat of the gens Julia. This act alone demonstrated an extraordinary self-assurance, an unwavering belief in his own worth, even when held captive and facing an uncertain fate. During the approximately 38 days he spent as a captive, Caesar treated the pirates not as his masters, but as his subordinates. He engaged them in intellectual exercises, reciting his orations and poems to them, and, if they failed to show sufficient appreciation, he would openly call them illiterate barbarians. He participated in their games and exercises, yet he also issued commands and warnings, often telling them that once he was free, he would return and crucify every one of them. This was not mere bravado. It was a clear articulation of his intent, delivered with a calm conviction that unsettled his captors. They, in turn, were reportedly amused by his audacious spirit, mistaking his confidence for youthful eccentricity. Upon the arrival of his ransom, paid by his associates who had gathered the substantial sum from various cities, Caesar was released. However, he did not forget his promise. Instead of returning directly to Rome, he immediately set about raising a small fleet. He gathered ships and men from the provincial cities that were weary of the pirate menace. With this hastily assembled force, he sailed back to Pharmacusa, where he found the pirates still encamped. Caesar launched a swift and decisive attack, surprising his former captors. He captured the majority of them, along with their treasure. He then transported the pirates to Pergamum, where he handed them over to the Roman governor of Asia, Marcus Junius. However, the governor was hesitant to execute the pirates, perhaps considering selling them into slavery for profit. Caesar, unwilling to see his promise unfulfilled or justice delayed, took matters into his own hands. He preempted the governor's decision, proceeding to crucify all of the captured pirates just as he had vowed. In a final, perhaps merciful gesture, he reportedly had their throats cut before they were affixed to the crosses, sparing them a prolonged agony. This incident, occurring early in his life, powerfully illustrated his unwavering determination, his capacity for decisive action, and his willingness to enforce his will, even against established authority. It was a clear precursor to the unyielding resolve that would define his later career. With the piratical episode concluded, Julius Caesar could finally turn his attention back to Rome. The political climate had shifted significantly in his absence. Sulla, the formidable dictator who had once proscribed Caesar, had voluntarily retired from public life in 79 BCE, retreating to his country estate. His death followed swiftly in 78 BCE, and this momentous departure left a power vacuum and signalled the beginning of a period of renewed political fluidity. The fear that had gripped Rome during Sulla's reign began to dissipate, and the path for those previously exiled or marginalised slowly reopened. Caesar's return to the capital was not that of a triumphant general, but rather a young man seeking to re-establish his position and influence within the Roman aristocracy. The city he returned to was still a cauldron of ambition and factionalism, yet it presented new opportunities for those with talent and drive. The Sullan constitution, designed to strengthen the Senate and weaken the tribunes, was already showing signs of strain, creating an environment ripe for political maneuvering and reform. Understanding that a public platform was essential for any aspiring politician, and Caesar began to leverage his refined rhetorical skills, he immersed himself in the legal arena, taking on cases that allowed him to display his oratorical prowess and align himself with popular causes. His speeches were noted for their passion, clarity, and persuasive power, qualities that quickly drew public attention. He prosecuted Gnaeus Cornelius Dolabella, a former Sullan partisan and ex-governor of Macedonia, on charges of extortion. Though Dolabella was ultimately acquitted, Caesar's bold challenge to a prominent Sullan figure demonstrated his courage and commitment to justice, earning him considerable popular acclaim. He then prosecuted Gaius Antonius Hybrida, another Sullan supporter, for similar offences. These legal battles, though not always resulting in convictions, served a crucial purpose. They allowed Caesar to publicly demonstrate his opposition to the excesses of the Sullan regime, and to position himself as a champion of the people. Through these public appearances, he meticulously built his reputation, not just as a skilled orator, but as a principled advocate for the common citizen. This period marked the beginning of Caesar's deliberate re-entry into the political fray. He was carefully laying the groundwork for his future career, cultivating allies, and making his presence known to both the Senate and the Roman populace. The years of exile and military service had matured him, honing his strategic mind and reinforcing his innate leadership qualities. Rome, still recovering from the brutal civil wars, was a city in flux, and Julius Caesar was now poised to navigate its complex currents, as ready to seize the opportunities that lay ahead. As Julius Caesar returned to Rome and began to re-establish himself, it is useful to gently consider the foundational structure of the Roman Republic itself, the very system he would navigate and ultimately transform. At its heart, the Republic was conceived as a delicate balance of power, designed to prevent any single individual or group from accumulating absolute authority. This ideal of republicanism, rooted in the rejection of kingship, championed liberty, civic duty, and a complex system of checks and balances. The Roman Republic operated through three primary components: the Senate, the various magistrates, and the assemblies of the people. Each played a distinct role, and their interactions, sometimes harmonious, often contentious, defined the political landscape. The Senate stood as the advisory body, composed primarily of former magistrates. Its members were typically men of wealth, experience, and aristocratic lineage. While technically an advisory council, the Senate's authority derived from its immense prestige, its control over state finances, foreign policy, and its ability to issue decrees that, though not legally binding, carried immense moral and political weight. Its deliberations often guided the Republic's direction, shaped by the collective wisdom and self-interest of its most powerful families. Alongside the Senate were the magistrates, elected officials who held executive and judicial power for fixed terms, usually 1 year. The highest-ranking magistrates were the two consuls, who served as the chief executives, commanded armies, and presided over the Senate and assemblies, and below them were the praetors, responsible for the administration of justice, the aediles, who oversaw public works, games, and markets, and the quaestors, who managed the state treasury. Each magistracy carried specific responsibilities and was a crucial step in the cursus honorum, the traditional sequence of offices that ambitious Romans pursued. The principle of collegiality, where at least two individuals held each major office, and the annual election cycle were intended to prevent the concentration of power. Finally, the assemblies represented the voice of the Roman people, though their structure was intricate and often favoured the wealthy. The most significant were the Centuriate Assembly, which elected consuls and praetors and declared war, and the Tribal Assembly, which elected lower magistrates and passed most laws. While these assemblies theoretically granted power to the citizens, their voting procedures could be manipulated, and the influence of powerful patrons often swayed their decisions. Despite this elaborate framework, the Roman Republic was characterized by inherent tensions. The enduring struggle between the Optimates, who championed the Senate's authority, and the interests of the aristocracy, and the Populares, who advocated for the rights of the common people and sought to use the assemblies to enact reforms, was a constant undercurrent. This fundamental division, coupled with the immense ambitions of individual Romans and the growing complexities of governing an expanding empire, placed immense strain on the Republic's fragile balance. It was within this intricate, often turbulent, system that Julius Caesar would continue to carve his path, understanding its strengths and, more importantly, its vulnerabilities. Beneath the formal structures of the Roman Republic lay a complex tapestry of social divisions, each stratum possessing its own interests and ambitions. These divisions were not merely economic, they were deeply rooted in tradition, legal status, and ancestral prestige, and they profoundly influenced the political landscape, often fueling the rivalries that contributed to the Republic's inherent instability. Understanding these social strata helps to illuminate the political currents that Julius Caesar navigated. At the apex of Roman society were the patricians, the ancient aristocratic families whose lineage could be traced back to the earliest days of Rome. Historically, they held exclusive rights to the most important religious and political offices. Though their exclusive grip on power had diminished over centuries, their prestige remained immense, and many still formed the core of the Senate. They often represented the conservative element within Roman politics, seeking to preserve the traditional order and the authority of the Senate. Below the patricians were the plebeians, the vast majority of the Roman citizenry. Initially excluded from political participation, the plebeians had, through centuries of struggle known as the conflict of the orders, gradually gained many rights, including the ability to hold magistracies and to pass laws through their own assemblies. Yet even among the plebeians significant distinctions existed. Wealthy plebeian families, known as the nobles, had often intermarried with patrician families and formed a new broader aristocracy. The vast majority of plebeians, however, were common citizens, farmers, artisans and labourers, whose daily lives were often a struggle and whose political influence, though theoretically present, was often limited by their economic circumstances and dependence on powerful patrons. A distinct and increasingly influential social class was the equites, or knights. Originally defined by their ability to afford a war horse, this class evolved into a wealthy merchant and business elite. They were often involved in tax collection, public contracts and finance, accumulating considerable fortunes. While they generally lack the ancient lineage of the patricians, their economic power gave them significant leverage. They often found themselves at odds with the senatorial aristocracy, particularly over issues of provincial administration and financial policy, creating another fault line in Roman politics. These social divisions directly fueled the formation of political factions, most notably the Optimates and the Populares. The Optimates typically drew their support from the conservative elements of the Senate and the old aristocratic families. They championed the traditional authority of the Senate, sought to maintain the existing social hierarchy, and often resisted radical reforms. They believed that stability lay in the hands of the established elite. In contrast, the Populares sought to gain political advantage by appealing directly to the common people, often through the popular assemblies. while often led by ambitious aristocrats themselves. Like Marius and later Caesar, they advocated for policies such as land redistribution, grain subsidies, and debt relief, which resonated with the broader plebeian population. They challenged the Senate's supremacy and were often willing to bypass traditional procedures to achieve their aims. These factions were not rigid political parties in the modern sense, but rather shifting alliances of individuals and families who shared common interests or political strategies. Their rivalries were intense, often personal, and frequently erupted into open conflict, contributing to the cycles of violence and political instability that marked the late Republic. Within this intricate web of social strata and competing factions, Julius Caesar would skillfully maneuver, leveraging his lineage, his popular appeal, and his military prowess to rise to unprecedented power. As the Republic navigated its intricate social divisions and political factions, another significant force began to emerge, further destabilizing the traditional order, the increasing ambition and personal rivalries among its most prominent citizens. The late Republic witnessed the rise of powerful individuals whose personal glory, military might, and vast wealth often overshadowed the collective good and challenged the very norms upon which the Republic was founded. These were men who garnered immense personal followings, blurring the lines between loyalty to the state and loyalty to a charismatic leader. Among these towering figures were Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known to history as Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Both men had risen to prominence in the turbulent aftermath of Sulla's dictatorship, demonstrating extraordinary military acumen and an unyielding drive for influence. Their careers exemplify the changing nature of power in Rome, where military success abroad increasingly translated into political leverage at home. Pompey, a brilliant general, had achieved a series of spectacular military victories across the Mediterranean. He had played a crucial role in suppressing the slave revolt led by Spartacus, and had purged the Mediterranean of pirates, securing vital trade routes. His campaigns in the east had brought vast territories under Roman control and immense wealth into the Roman treasury. These achievements earned him immense popularity among the common people and a loyal army devoted to his person. However, upon his return to Rome, Pompey found the Senate reluctant to ratify his eastern settlements and reward his veterans with land, fueling a sense of grievance that would shape future political alignments. Marcus Licinius Crassus, while also a general of considerable skill, was perhaps even more renowned for his immense wealth, making him one of the richest men in Roman history. Much of his fortune was amassed through shrewd, sometimes ruthless business dealings, including exploiting the proscriptions of Sulla and engaging in extensive real estate speculation. Crassus also maintained a vast network of clients and debtors, giving him significant political sway through patronage. His military achievements, though substantial, particularly his role in defeating Spartacus, were often overshadowed by Pompey's more glamorous campaigns. Crassus harboured a deep ambition for military glory that would rival Pompey's, a desire that would ultimately lead him to a tragic end. These two men, Pompey and Crassus, represented the pinnacle of Roman power outside of the traditional senatorial consensus. Their personal rivalry was a palpable force in Roman politics, a constant undercurrent of competition for prestige, influence, and military command. They each commanded significant personal armies and vast networks of clients, allowing them to exert pressure on the Senate and the assemblies in ways that increasingly bypassed traditional republican processes. The Republic, designed for a smaller, less expansive state, found itself ill-equipped to manage the ambitions of such powerful individuals. The traditional checks and balances began to strain under the weight of personal loyalties and the allure of military glory. The careers of Pompey and Crassus highlighted a growing reliance on extraordinary commands, often granted for extended periods and with immense authority, further eroding the principles of annual magistracies and collective governance. This environment, where personal power eclipsed institutional norms, set the stage for the ascent of other ambitious figures, including Julius Caesar himself. Amidst this landscape of burgeoning personal power and intense rivalry, Julius Caesar continued his calculated ascent through the Roman political hierarchy, the cursus honorum. His early career was marked by strategic moves designed to cultivate popular support and establish his presence as a formidable force in Roman public life. In 65 BC, Caesar held the office of aedile, a magistracy primarily responsible for the supervision of public works, markets, and, crucially, the organization of public games and festivals. This role offered a unique opportunity for ambitious politicians to demonstrate their generosity and garner widespread popular favor. Caesar seized this opportunity with characteristic boldness. He invested enormous sums, often borrowed, into staging spectacles that surpassed anything Rome had seen in years. His gladiatorial contests were particularly lavish, featuring an unprecedented number of combatants and elaborate settings. The theatrical displays and public feasts he sponsored were designed to awe the populace and create a lasting impression of his magnanimity. While these expenditures left Caesar deeply in debt, they also solidified his reputation as a champion of the people and a leader willing to spend lavishly for public entertainment, a key ingredient for political success in Rome. Beyond the games, Caesar also undertook significant public works during his aedileship, restoring monuments to his Aunt Julia and her husband, Gaius Marius, figures whose memory had been suppressed during Sulla's reign. This act was a clear political statement, signalling his alignment with the Populares faction and subtly challenging the legacy of Sulla, further endearing him to those who remembered Marius with affection. His next major political achievement came in 63 BC, with his election as Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the Roman state religion. This was an extraordinarily significant position, not only for its religious authority, but also for the considerable political influence it wielded. The Pontifex Maximus oversaw all state cults, appointed Vestal virgins, and was responsible for the Roman calendar, a role that could be manipulated for political ends. What made Caesar's election particularly remarkable was his relative youth. He was only in his late 30s, and the office was usually held by much older, more experienced senators. The election for Pontifex Maximus was fiercely contested. Caesar faced two highly respected and much older candidates, Quintus Lutatius Catulus and Publius Servilius Vatia Isauricus, both men of considerable standing and influence. Despite their seniority and established reputations, Caesar campaigned vigorously, drawing upon his popular support and, it is believed, significant financial backing, likely from Crassus, to secure the votes. His victory was a stunning upset, demonstrating his growing ability to mobilize the Roman populace and navigate the intricate world of Roman elections. This religious office granted Caesar not only immense prestige, but also a lifetime appointment, providing him with a secure base of power and an official residence in the Roman Forum. His tenure as aedile and his surprising election as Pontifex Maximus were crucial early steps, showcasing his strategic brilliance, his willingness to incur debt for political gain, and his undeniable appeal to the Roman people. These offices cemented his position as a rising star, or a man whose ambition was matched only by his political astuteness. As Caesar's political star continued its ascent, the fragmented nature of Roman politics presented both obstacles and opportunities. The traditional mechanisms of the Republic were increasingly strained by the personal ambitions of its leading figures. It was in this environment, around 60 BC, that a pivotal and unprecedented political arrangement came into being, the First Triumvirate. This was a secret, informal alliance between three of Rome's most powerful men, Julius Caesar, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, and Marcus Licinius Crassus. Each man entered this pact with distinct motivations and specific grievances against the conservative senatorial faction, often referred to as the Optimates. Pompey, the renowned general, had recently returned from his triumphant campaigns in the east, having secured vast territories and immense wealth for Rome. He sought ratification of his eastern settlements and land grants for his demobilized veterans, requests that the Senate, wary of his immense power, was stubbornly obstructing. Crassus, immensely wealthy and a skilled manipulator of Roman finance, desired a reduction in the tax contracts for the Publicani, the tax collectors in Asia, in whom he had significant investments. He also sought a prominent military command, having been overshadowed by Pompey's recent successes. The Senate, again, proved resistant to his demands, protecting the established order and their own interests. Caesar, for his part, aimed for the consulship, the highest office in the Republic, for the year 59 BC. He knew that to achieve this, and to enact significant legislation once in office, he would need overwhelming support that neither his popular appeal nor his existing alliances alone could guarantee. He required the military prestige of Pompey and the immense financial resources of Crassus. The formation of the triumvirate was a pragmatic, almost cynical, recognition that individually, each man faced significant opposition from the entrenched senatorial elite. Together, however, their combined influence, wealth, and popular support would be virtually irresistible. They agreed to support each other's legislative agendas and to use their collective power to overcome any senatorial obstruction. The alliance was sealed through personal ties as well. Pompey, a much older man, married Caesar's only daughter Julia, further cementing the bond between the two ambitious leaders. This secret agreement effectively bypassed the traditional republican institutions. It represented a fundamental shift in Roman politics, where personal allegiances and shared ambitions began to supersede the constitutional framework. The triumvirate was not an official body but a powerful extra-legal force that would profoundly reshape the trajectory of the Republic, demonstrating that true power now lay with a few dominant individuals rather than the collective will of the Senate. Their combined strength was formidable, and Rome was about to witness the consequences of this powerful, unspoken pact. With the backing of the newly formed triumvirate, Julius Caesar successfully secured the consulship for the year 59 BC, an office he shared with Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, a staunch optimate and a vocal opponent. From the outset, Caesar's consulship was marked by an unwavering determination to enact his agenda, much of which was designed to fulfill the promises made within the triumvirate and to further cultivate his popular support. His primary legislative focus was on land reform. Caesar proposed an agrarian law intended to distribute state-owned land, particularly in Campania, to Pompey's veterans and to impoverished Roman citizens with 3 or more children. This was not merely an act of benevolence. It was a strategic move to address the growing problem of landless Romans and to reward the loyalty of Pompey's soldiers, thereby strengthening the triumvirate's popular base. The proposed law faced immediate and fierce opposition from the conservative faction within the Senate. They viewed such measures as dangerously populist, a threat to their own landholdings, and an erosion of traditional senatorial authority. Bibulus, Caesar's consular colleague, attempted to block the legislation by declaring unfavourable omens, a common tactic used to delay or prevent the passage of laws. However, Caesar was not deterred. He bypassed the Senate, a move that was highly unconventional and deeply provocative, by taking his proposals directly to the popular assembly, the Comitia Tributa. When Bibulus and other optimates continued their obstruction, Caesar, with the visible presence of Pompey and Crassus and their supporters, used more forceful methods. During one particularly heated assembly, Bibulus was physically assaulted, his fasces, the symbols of consular authority, broken, and he was forced to retreat to his home, Ischia, where he remained for the rest of his term, effectively boycotting his consular duties. This led to a sardonic observation among Romans that the year was not of Caesar and Bibulus, but of Julius and Caesar, highlighting Caesar's unchallenged dominance. With the opposition neutralized, Caesar swiftly pushed through his agrarian law. He also ensured the ratification of Pompey's eastern settlements and secured the desired tax concessions for Crassus's Publicani, thereby satisfying the key demands of his triumvirate partners. Further legislation followed, including measures to publish the daily proceedings of the Senate and the popular assemblies, making government more transparent to the public, a move that further enhanced his populist image. And Caesar's first consulship was a period of intense political maneuvering and unprecedented actions. It demonstrated his willingness to challenge and even disregard established senatorial procedures when they impeded his goals. His relentless pursuit of land reform and his direct appeal to the people cemented his reputation as a champion of the populares, while simultaneously deepening the rift between himself and the traditionalist elements of the Roman Republic. This year laid bare the growing fragility of the Republic's institutions and the raw power wielded by its most ambitious individuals. As his tumultuous consulship drew to a close in 59 BC, Julius Caesar carefully navigated the political landscape to secure his next command. Traditionally, former consuls were assigned provincial governorships for a year or two, but Caesar had grander ambitions. Through the machinations of the triumvirate, a special law, the Lex Vitinia, was passed. This law granted him an extraordinary 5-year proconsular command over Cisalpine Gaul, the region of northern Italy settled by Gauls, and Illyricum, a territory along the Adriatic coast. Later, upon the unexpected death of Quintus Metellus Sylla, the Senate, perhaps seeing an opportunity to remove Caesar from Rome, added Transalpine Gaul to his portfolio. These combined provinces offered Caesar an unparalleled opportunity. Cisalpine Gaul, with its fertile lands and proximity to Rome, provided a crucial base for recruitment and logistical support. It was also a region that allowed him to maintain close contact with political events in the capital, a strategic advantage for any ambitious Roman. Illyricum, though less developed, presented a frontier where military action could be anticipated, offering the potential for minor campaigns and the training of troops. However, it was Transalpine Gaul, the vast territory beyond the Alps, that held the greatest strategic importance and the most tantalizing prospect for military glory. This province, often referred to simply as Provincia, was Rome's gateway to the largely unexplored and often turbulent lands of independent Gaul. It was a region rich in resources, but also a source of constant concern due to the volatile nature of the various Gallic tribes and their frequent migrations or conflicts, which sometimes spilled over into Roman territory. For a Roman general of Caesar's ambition, such a command was a golden opportunity. The Republic's political system, while valuing civic service, also placed immense importance on military achievement. A successful campaign brought immense prestige, wealth from spoils, and the unwavering loyalty of veteran soldiers, a formidable political asset. A proconsulship in a frontier province allowed a general to raise and command legions, to engage in warfare, and to expand Rome's dominion, all without the constant scrutiny of the Senate in Rome. Caesar understood this profoundly. His time as proconsul in Gaul was not merely an administrative posting. It was to be the crucible in which his military genius would be forged, and the foundation upon which his future power would be built. The prospect of leading legions into battle, of conquering new territories, and of bringing glory and wealth back to Rome was a powerful draw. As he departed Rome in 58 BC, he carried with him not just the authority of his office, but the weight of his own towering ambition, set to unfold across the vast untamed landscapes of Gaul. Upon arriving in Transalpine Gaul in 58 BC, Julius Caesar found himself immediately confronted by a significant challenge that would swiftly draw him into conflict. The Helvetii, a large and powerful Celtic tribe from what is now Switzerland, had decided to migrate en masse across Gaul seeking new lands. Their planned route would take them directly through Roman territory, and their sheer numbers, estimated to be hundreds of thousands, represented a substantial threat to Roman provincial security and the stability of allied tribes. Caesar, with only one legion initially available near Geneva, acted with characteristic swiftness. He moved to block the Helvetes' passage across the Rhone River, constructing a formidable defensive rampart and ditch over a considerable distance in a remarkably short time. This initial manoeuvre demonstrated his engineering prowess and his ability to mobilize his forces efficiently. After denying them passage through Roman territory, the Helvetii attempted an alternative route, leading them through the lands of the Aedui, a Roman ally. The Aedui, distressed by the depredations of the migrating tribe, appealed to Caesar for aid, providing him with a legitimate pretext for intervention beyond Roman provincial borders. This plea for assistance allowed Caesar to pursue the Helvetii into central Gaul. He quickly assembled additional legions from Cisalpine Gaul, demonstrating his ability to rapidly concentrate military power. The campaign culminated in the Battle of the Arar, or Saône River, where Caesar's legions decisively defeated a portion of the Helvetii as they were crossing. This was followed by the larger and more definitive Battle of Bibracte, where the main body of the Helvetii was utterly routed. The remnants of the tribe were compelled to return to their original lands, their migration halted, and their power broken. Scarcely had the Helvetian threat been neutralized when another major challenge emerged. Ariovistus, a formidable Germanic chieftain, had led his Suebi tribe across the Rhine and established a dominant presence in Gaul, subjugating several Gallic tribes, including the Aedui. These oppressed tribes, seeing Caesar's recent success against the Helvetii, again appealed to him for protection. Caesar, in recognizing the long-term threat posed by a strong Germanic presence so close to Roman territory, and perceiving an opportunity to further enhance Roman influence, confronted Ariovistus. Through a combination of diplomatic maneuvering and swift military action, Caesar cornered Ariovistus near modern-day Mulhouse. In a tense engagement, Caesar's legions, despite initial apprehension among some of his troops regarding the fearsome reputation of the Germans, achieved another decisive victory. Ariovistus and his Suebi were driven back across the Rhine, suffering heavy losses. These early campaigns, against both the Helvetii and Ariovistus, firmly established Caesar's military reputation in Gaul, showcasing his tactical skill, the discipline of his legions, and his willingness to act decisively to protect Roman interests and allies. They marked the beginning of a prolonged and transformative Roman presence in the vast lands of Gaul. The formidable military successes achieved by Julius Caesar in Gaul were not merely the result of his personal genius, but were deeply rooted in the extraordinary qualities of the Roman legions he commanded. These legions were not simply collections of soldiers. They were highly organized, meticulously trained, and profoundly disciplined fighting units, the bedrock of Roman military supremacy. Each legion, typically comprising around 4,800 to 6,000 men, was a self-contained army, meticulously structured into cohorts, maniples, and centuries. The legionaries themselves were professional soldiers, often volunteers who'd committed to long terms of service, seeking both pay and the promise of land upon retirement. Their training was rigorous and ceaseless, encompassing not only combat drills with sword and shield, but also extensive marching, engineering tasks, and the construction of fortified camps. This constant practice fostered an unparalleled level of cohesion and endurance. What set Caesar's legions apart, however, was their exceptional loyalty to him personally. Through shared hardships, consistent victories, and his willingness to lead from the front, Caesar cultivated a deep bond with his men. He knew many of his centurions by name, spoke to them directly, and ensured they were well rewarded for their bravery. This personal connection translated into unwavering morale and a willingness to execute even the most dangerous commands. The soldiers saw in Caesar not just a general, but a figure worthy of their absolute trust and devotion. Beyond discipline and loyalty, Caesar was a master of military innovation, both in tactics and in the application of engineering. He understood the importance of speed and surprise, often forcing marches that covered astonishing distances to catch enemies off guard. His use of combined arms, coordinating cavalry, infantry, and sometimes even artillery was highly effective. He also demonstrated a remarkable adaptability, tailoring his strategies to the specific terrain and the nature of his adversaries. Perhaps one of Caesar's most celebrated innovations was in siege warfare and defensive engineering. The construction of the circumvallation and contravallation lines around Alesia, for instance, showcased an unprecedented scale of military engineering. His legions were not just fighters, they were skilled builders, and capable of constructing bridges, roads, and fortifications with astonishing speed and precision. The famous Roman testudo formation, a protective shell of interlocking shields while not new, was employed with devastating effect, allowing his men to advance under a hail of projectiles. These elements, the professional training, the unwavering discipline, the profound personal loyalty to their commander, and Caesar's own innovative tactical and engineering genius, combined to create an almost unstoppable military force. It was this synergy that allowed Caesar's legions to overcome numerically superior forces, endure harsh conditions, and ultimately reshape the face of Gaul. Their prowess became a legend, a testament to the power of organization, leadership, and the human will. With his legions honed and his strategic mind fully engaged, thus Julius Caesar embarked upon a relentless series of campaigns that would fundamentally alter the geopolitical landscape of Gaul. His initial encounters had set a precedent for Roman dominance, and he was determined to solidify this control. The year 57 BC saw Caesar turn his attention to the Belgae, a formidable confederation of tribes dwelling in the northern reaches of Gaul, renowned for their martial prowess and fierce independence. Caesar understood that subduing the Belgae would be a crucial step in asserting Roman authority over the entirety of Gaul. He moved swiftly, employing his characteristic blend of rapid marches and decisive engagements. One particularly notable confrontation occurred against the Nervii, a particularly warlike Belgic tribe. The Nervii, masters of ambush tactics, surprised Caesar's legions while they were establishing their camp. The ensuing battle was one of the most desperate and hard-fought of the entire Gallic wars, pushing the Roman soldiers to their very limits. In the midst of the chaos, Caesar himself was said to have seized a shield and plunged into the thickest part of the fighting, rallying his wavering troops through his personal example. This act of courage, combined with the unwavering discipline and training of his legions, ultimately turned the tide. The Nervii were decisively defeated, suffering immense casualties, and their confederation was shattered. This victory, hard-won and costly, sent a clear message across Gaul. Roman might was not to be underestimated. Following the defeat of the Belgae, Caesar's campaigns continued at an astonishing pace. He systematically moved from one region to another, confronting various Gallic tribes, each presenting unique challenges. His strategy was often multifaceted, sometimes engaging in direct pitch battles, at other times employing sieges, or even using diplomacy and intimidation to secure submission. He was particularly adept at exploiting existing rivalries among the Gallic tribes, often playing one against another to prevent a unified resistance. The conquest was characterized by a meticulous documentation of his progress, later compiled into his commentaries on the Gallic War. These accounts, while serving as a form of propaganda, also provide invaluable insight into his strategic thinking. They reveal a commander who was constantly assessing the terrain, the enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and the morale of his own troops. He was a master of logistics, ensuring his legions were supplied and able to operate far from their bases. Through these years of sustained military effort, Caesar effectively brought vast territories under Roman sway. The sheer scale and speed of his conquest were unprecedented. He demonstrated a strategic brilliance that allowed him to overcome diverse and often fierce opposition, solidifying Roman control and laying the groundwork for a much larger empire. The relentless expansion of Roman power across Gaul was a testament to his ambition and his profound military acumen. Having established a significant degree of control over Gaul, Julius Caesar's ambition began to stretch beyond its recognized borders. 2 daring expeditions, the one across the formidable Rhine River into Germania, and 2 voyages across the treacherous waters of the English Channel to Britain, stand as testament to his audacious spirit and strategic foresight. These ventures, while not always yielding immediate territorial gains, carried profound symbolic weight and served multiple practical purposes. The first crossing of the Rhine occurred in 55 BC. Caesar's stated motivation was to deter Germanic tribes, particularly the Usipetes and Tencteri, who had crossed into Gaul and posed a perceived threat to Roman stability. Rather than merely repelling them, Caesar decided to make a dramatic statement. In just 10 days, his engineers constructed an astonishing wooden bridge across the wide and swift-flowing Rhine, a feat of engineering that astounded both Romans and Gauls. This temporary structure, a testament to Roman ingenuity and logistical capability, allowed his legions to march into Germanic territory. The expedition lasted only 18 days, serving as a powerful demonstration of Roman military reach and a warning to any who might contemplate incursions into Gaul. It was a strategic display of force, designed to instill fear and respect rather than to conquer new lands. Later that same year, Caesar turned his gaze towards the mysterious island of Britannia. The Britons, he argued, had been providing aid to Gallic tribes resisting Roman authority, and he saw an opportunity to both punish them and gather intelligence about the island. The first invasion of Britain in 55 BC was a reconnaissance in force. Landing on the shores of Kent, his legions faced fierce resistance from the native Britons, who fought with chariots and a deep knowledge of their terrain. The landing itself was difficult, hampered by the weather and the unfamiliar shore. Caesar's forces secured a beachhead and engaged the Britons, but logistical difficulties and the approach of winter compelled him to withdraw after a relatively short stay. Undeterred, Caesar launched a second, more substantial invasion of Britain in 54 BC. This time he brought a much larger force, around 5 legions and 2,000 cavalry, and a greater understanding of the challenges involved. He pushed further inland, crossing the River Thames and engaging with various British tribes, most notably those led by the chieftain Cassivellaunus. While Caesar secured tribute and pledges of loyalty from some tribes, and even captured Cassivellaunus's stronghold, he did not establish a permanent Roman presence. The primary objectives were achieved. The Britons were shown the might of Rome, their ability to support Gallic resistance was curtailed, and valuable geographic and ethnographic information was gathered. These expeditions beyond Gaul's direct borders were not about immediate annexation. They were about extending Roman influence, securing the frontiers of the newly conquered province, and perhaps most importantly, enhancing Caesar's personal prestige and legend back in Rome. Crossing the Rhine and invading Britain were acts of daring that captivated the Roman imagination, marking Caesar as a commander of extraordinary vision and courage, pushing the boundaries of the known world. Despite Caesar's impressive campaigns and the apparent subjugation of numerous Gallic tribes, the spirit of resistance had not been entirely extinguished. Beneath the surface of Roman control, discontent simmered, fueled by cultural differences, the burden of Roman presence, and a deep-seated desire for independence. This simmering resentment would soon ignite into a widespread conflagration, led by a figure who would become the embodiment of Gallic defiance, Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix was an Arvernian chieftain, a member of a powerful and influential Gallic tribe from the region now known as Auvergne. He possessed charisma, strategic acumen, and a profound understanding of his own people. His rise to prominence began in 52 BC, during a period when Caesar was distracted by political turmoil in Rome and dealing with the aftermath of earlier, smaller revolts. Seizing this opportune moment, Vercingetorix rallied his own tribe and quickly began to forge alliances with other Gallic peoples who had grown weary of Roman rule. His message resonated deeply. He spoke of freedom, of uniting against the foreign invader, and of restoring Gallic pride. Unlike previous tribal leaders who often acted in isolation, Vercingetorix possessed a broader vision. He understood that only a unified Gallic front could hope to challenge the formidable Roman legions. He skillfully employed diplomacy and persuasion, but also coercion, to bring disparate tribes, some of whom had historically been rivals, under his banner. This unprecedented unity represented a profound shift in the nature of Gallic resistance. The challenge Vercingetorix posed to Caesar was unlike any he had faced before. This was not a localized uprising, but a coordinated national movement. Vercingetorix implemented a scorched earth policy, destroying towns and food supplies that could be of use to the advancing Roman army. This brutal but effective strategy aimed to starve Caesar's legions and deny them the resources necessary to campaign deep within Gaul. He understood the strength of his forces, primarily their cavalry and their intimate knowledge of the terrain, and he adapted his tactics to counter Roman strengths. The scale of the revolt was immense, threatening to unravel all of Caesar's previous conquests. Garrisons were attacked, Roman supply lines were harassed, and the loyalty of previously subdued tribes became tenuous. Caesar, who had been wintering in Cisalpine Gaul, was forced to return with urgency, traversing snow-covered mountains to confront this grave new threat. Then the stage was set for a desperate struggle, a defining conflict that would determine the fate of Gaul and the reputation of its conqueror. Vercingetorix, with his unified Gallic army, presented the most formidable test of Caesar's military genius. The culmination of the Gallic Wars, a pivotal moment in both Caesar's life and the history of Gaul, arrived with the siege of Alesia. This engagement stands as a testament to Caesar's extraordinary military engineering capabilities and his unyielding resolve. After a series of tactical maneuvers and skirmishes, Vercingetorix and his main army found themselves encircled within the hill fort of Alesia, a formidable natural stronghold. Recognizing the strategic importance of this position, Caesar embarked upon one of the most ambitious siege operations in ancient history, where he ordered the construction of a massive double line of fortifications around Alesia. The inner line, known as the circumvallation, stretched for approximately 11 Roman miles. It was designed to prevent Vercingetorix's trapped forces from breaking out. This inner wall was a complex system of ditches, ramparts, watchtowers, and various defensive obstacles, all meticulously engineered and rapidly constructed by the Roman legions. But Caesar did not stop there. He anticipated that a large Gallic relief force would attempt to break the siege. To counter this, he ordered the construction of a second, even larger line of fortifications facing outwards. This outer line, the contravallation, extended for approximately 14 Roman miles, creating a defensive ring around his own besieging army, and this meant that Caesar's legions were effectively fighting on two fronts simultaneously, containing Vercingetorix within Alesia while defending themselves from the approaching Gallic reinforcements. The sheer scale of this engineering feat was staggering. Thousands of Roman soldiers working tirelessly excavated miles of trenches, erected palisades and constructed fortified camps. The ingenuity of the Roman military machine was on full display. Within Alesia, Vercingetorix's army and the civilian population began to suffer from starvation. Outside, the Gallic relief army, estimated to be far larger than Caesar's forces, launched desperate, coordinated attacks against the Roman contravallation. For weeks, fierce battles raged. Caesar's legions, outnumbered, fought with discipline and ferocity, repelling repeated assaults from both the trapped Gauls and the relief force. At critical moments, Caesar himself would lead charges, inspiring his men through his personal bravery. Ultimately, the Roman defences held. The Gallic relief force was decisively defeated, and with their last hope extinguished, the starving defenders of Alesia had no choice but to surrender. Vercingetorix, recognizing the futility of further resistance, famously rode out and laid down his arms before Caesar, offering himself as a sacrifice for his people. The capitulation of Alesia marked the definitive end of organized Gallic resistance. It was a victory of unparalleled magnitude, cementing Roman control over Gaul and solidifying Caesar's reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. The long and arduous Gallic wars, which had consumed nearly a decade, were essentially over. With the fall of Alesia and the capture of Vercingetorix, the widespread, organised resistance of the Gallic tribes crumbled. Though some isolated pockets of rebellion would continue for a short period, these were systematically suppressed by Caesar and his lieutenants. The long years of campaigning had finally brought Gaul under Roman dominion. This period, following the decisive victory, saw the gradual pacification of the vast territory. The long-term impact of Roman rule on Gaul was profound and transformative. While the conquest itself was brutal, marked by significant loss of life and the enslavement of countless individuals, it also ushered in an era of relative peace and stability. Roman administration began to be established, bringing with it Roman law, infrastructure, and urban development. Roads were constructed, facilitating trade and communication across the newly acquired province. Roman cities, with their distinctive architecture, public baths, and forums, began to emerge alongside or replace existing Gallic settlements. Latin, the language of the conquerors, slowly but inexorably began to spread, gradually influencing and eventually largely supplanting the various Celtic tongues spoken by the Gauls. Roman culture, art and customs were introduced, leading to a process of Romanization, where elements of Gallic identity began to merge with or be subsumed by Roman ways. Over time, many Gauls would adopt Roman citizenship, participate in Roman governance, and even serve in the Roman legions. The region, once a collection of disparate and often warring tribes, was integrated into the vast Roman Republic, becoming a vital source of resources, manpower, and revenue. For Caesar himself, the Gallic Wars brought immeasurable wealth and unparalleled prestige. The campaigns yielded vast quantities of gold, silver, and other spoils, much of which was sent back to Rome, enriching both the state and Caesar's personal coffers. This wealth allowed him to generously reward his loyal soldiers, fund ambitious public works, and cultivate an even larger base of political support through strategic expenditures and lavish games. More importantly, the conquest of Gaul provided Caesar with an army of hardened, devoted veterans who revered him. These legions, forged in the crucible of countless battles, were an instrument of immense power, loyal not to the Republic, but to their victorious general. The military glory he achieved in Gaul elevated him to an extraordinary status, making him a figure of immense influence and celebrity throughout the Roman world. He had expanded Rome's territory significantly, secured its northern frontier, and demonstrated a military genius that few could rival. This newfound power and popularity, however, also stirred deep anxieties among his political rivals in Rome, setting the stage for future conflict. While Julius Caesar was engaged in the arduous campaigns across Gaul, solidifying his military reputation and Rome's territorial reach, the delicate political balance he had carefully constructed back in the capital began to unravel. The Republic, already prone to internal strife, found its foundations weakening further in his absence. The alliance known as the First Triumvirate, which had once bound Caesar, Pompey and Crassus in a formidable, albeit unofficial power-sharing agreement, was inherently fragile. It relied on a careful equilibrium of ambition and mutual benefit, a balance that soon proved unsustainable. A significant blow to this alliance, and indeed to the fabric of Roman politics, occurred with the death of Marcus Licinius Crassus. Driven by a desire for military glory that might rival Caesar's burgeoning fame, Crassus embarked on a disastrous campaign against the Parthian Empire in 53 BCE. At the Battle of Carrhae, his legions suffered a catastrophic defeat, and Crassus himself was killed. His demise removed a crucial balancing force within the triumvirate. Crassus had often served as a mediator, a financial powerhouse, and a third point of leverage, preventing any single member from dominating too completely. With his removal, the dynamic shifted irrevocably, leaving only two colossal figures to contend for ultimate supremacy. The growing rivalry between Pompey and Caesar, once tempered by their shared interests and the presence of Crassus, now began to intensify without restraint. Pompey, who had remained in Rome, found himself increasingly aligned with the conservative senatorial faction. This group, often referred to as the Optimates, had always viewed Caesar with suspicion, fearing his popular appeal and his disregard for traditional republican norms. They saw in Pompey a champion who could potentially curb Caesar's escalating power. Pompey, for his part, became increasingly wary of Caesar's immense military success and the unwavering loyalty of his Gallic legions. The sheer scale of Caesar's achievements in Gaul, coupled with the immense wealth and influence he had accumulated, made him a formidable and potentially dangerous rival. The personal ties that had once helped cement the triumvirate also weakened. Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, a woman who reportedly fostered a strong bond between the two men, had tragically died in 54 BCE, followed shortly by her infant child. Her passing removed a significant emotional and familial connection that had previously softened the edges of their political ambitions. Without Crassus and without Julia, the bonds of the triumvirate became irreparably strained. The fragile peace that had characterized their uneasy alliance shattered, replaced by an escalating tension that pointed inexorably towards an open confrontation. The Republic's shifting sands were preparing for a storm, with Caesar and Pompey at its opposing epicenters. As Caesar's triumphs in Gaul continued to reverberate through the Roman world, a deep and palpable apprehension began to settle within the venerable halls of the Senate. The conservative faction, the Optimates, had long viewed Caesar with a mixture of disdain and suspicion, seeing him as a populist demagogue who threatened the traditional aristocratic order of the Republic. Now their concerns escalated into genuine fear. Caesar's military victories were not merely adding territory to Rome, they were forging an unbreakable bond between a charismatic general and a vast, loyal and battle-hardened army. Each successful campaign, each new conquest, amplified his prestige and popularity among the common people, further diminishing the Senate's own authority. His wealth, too, had grown exponentially. The spoils of war from Gaul, the tributes from subjugated tribes, and the vast resources he now commanded allowed him to engage in widespread patronage, funding public works, distributing gifts, and cultivating a network of indebted clients across Rome. This financial power, combined with his military might and popular appeal, created a formidable political machine that seemed beyond the Senate's control. They perceived him not just as an ambitious politician, but as a potential tyrant who could dismantle the Republic from within. The Senate, particularly the most ardent optimates, grew increasingly desperate to curb Caesar's influence. Their primary objective became to separate him from his legions. Roman law dictated that a general holding imperium, the authority to command an army, could not enter Rome without relinquishing that command. This was a critical safeguard designed to prevent military coups and maintain civilian control. Caesar's proconsular command in Gaul was set to expire at the end of 49 BCE. He sought to stand for a second consulship, but to do so, he would need to be physically present in Rome to declare his candidacy. However, if he entered Rome as a private citizen, he would be vulnerable to prosecution by his political enemies for alleged irregularities during his first consulship and governorship. Therefore, Caesar sought to run for consul in absentia, a privilege that had been granted to Pompey in the past, and one that he believed he deserved given his service to the Republic. The Senate, however, was resolute in its opposition. Led by figures such as Cato the Younger and Marcellus, they initiated a series of legislative maneuvers designed to recall Caesar from his command prematurely, or to strip him of his legions before his term officially ended. They proposed that he must lay down his command and disband his army before standing for election, a move that would leave him politically exposed and militarily defenseless. These attempts were not merely political wrangling, they were a direct challenge to Caesar's power and a desperate effort to reassert senatorial authority over an increasingly independent and powerful general. The Senate's fear was palpable, fueled by the memory of past strong men like Sulla, who had marched on Rome with his army. They believed that by denying Caesar his requests and forcing him into a vulnerable position, they could neutralize the threat he posed to the traditional republic. However, these very actions pushed Caesar to a critical juncture, forcing him to consider options that would ultimately shatter the peace of Rome. The tension between Caesar and the Senate reached its zenith in early 49 BCE. On January 7th, the Senate passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, a decree of ultimate resolution, essentially declaring a state of emergency. This extraordinary measure granted the consuls and other magistrates the power to take any action necessary to preserve the Republic, effectively authorizing them to use force against anyone deemed a threat. While not explicitly naming Caesar, the intent was clear. It was an ultimatum, demanding that he disband his army and relinquish his provinces by a specified date, or be declared an enemy of the state. This decree represented a direct challenge, leaving Caesar with a stark choice. To comply would mean surrendering his command, disbanding his loyal legions, and returning to Rome as a private citizen, where his political adversaries awaited with eager prosecutions. This path would almost certainly lead to his political ruin, and possibly even his death. To defy the Senate, however, would be an act of open rebellion, initiating a civil war against the very republic he had served. As these critical days unfolded, Caesar was stationed in Cisalpine Gaul, the Roman province south of the Alps. His command extended only to the Rubicon River, a small, or unassuming waterway that marked the boundary between Cisalpine Gaul and Italia proper. Roman law strictly forbade any general from crossing this river with an armed force. To do so was an act of treason, an invasion of the sacred heartland of the Republic. The Rubicon was more than just a geographical marker. It was a symbolic line, a legal and constitutional barrier that separated a governor's legitimate authority from an unlawful assault on Rome itself. On the evening of January 10th, 49 BCE, Caesar stood at the banks of the Rubicon. With him was the 13th Legion, his most trusted and devoted troops. The moment was heavy with destiny. He paused, contemplating the immense implications of his next move. The decision he faced was not merely a tactical one, but a moral and political turning point that would forever alter the course of Roman history. The fate of the Republic, and indeed his own future, hung precariously in the balance. After a period of profound deliberation, Caesar made his fateful choice. With a decisive command, he led his legions across the shallow waters of the Rubicon. As his soldiers waded through the stream, legend recounts that Caesar uttered the immortal words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. This phrase conveyed the irreversible nature of his decision. There was no turning back, no possibility of retreat or compromise. By crossing the Rubicon, Caesar had committed himself to a path of civil war, a confrontation with Pompey and the senatorial forces that would determine the very soul of the Roman Republic. The peaceful quiet of the riverbank was shattered by the resolute footsteps of men marching towards an uncertain, tumultuous future. The news of Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon sent a profound shockwave throughout the Roman world. The Senate and Pompey, who had underestimated Caesar's resolve, were caught largely unprepared. Their plans for a legal and political maneuver had suddenly escalated into an armed conflict, and the reality of a Roman general marching on Rome itself was deeply unsettling. Panic began to spread through the capital as citizens contemplated the prospect of an internal war, a conflict that pitted neighbour against neighbour and legionary against legionary. Caesar's advance into Italy was remarkably swift. He moved with a speed that surprised his opponents, capturing towns and cities with minimal resistance. His legions, hardened by years of campaigning in Gaul, were disciplined and loyal. Many Italian cities, rather than resisting, opened their gates, either out of fear or out of sympathy for Caesar's cause. The speed of his progress created an atmosphere of disarray among the senatorial faction, who had expected a more gradual engagement. Pompey and the majority of the Senate, unable to muster sufficient forces to defend Rome effectively against Caesar's rapid advance, made the difficult decision to abandon the capital. They retreated south, intending to gather their strength and resources in the eastern provinces, where Pompey had extensive connections and military experience. This evacuation of Rome underscored the profound disruption caused by Caesar's actions, leaving the heart of the Republic exposed and vulnerable. The civil war that now engulfed Rome was a profound tragedy. For generations, Romans had united against external enemies, expanding their dominion across the Mediterranean. Now, the very fabric of their society was tearing apart, as citizens found themselves forced to choose sides in a conflict that fractured families and friendships. The ideals of the Republic, once a unifying force, were now invoked by both sides as justification for their actions, leading to a deeply entrenched and bitter struggle. This was not a war against foreign adversaries, but a conflict where Roman legions, bearing the same eagle standards and trained in the same formidable tactics, would meet each other on the battlefield. The thought of Roman blood being shed by Roman hands was a source of great sorrow and foreboding for many. The conflict represented the ultimate failure of political discourse and compromise, a descent into violence that would leave an indelible mark on the soul of the Republic. The initial phase of the war, marked by Caesar's swift progress through Italy and the senatorial retreat, set the stage for a prolonged and devastating struggle, signalling the beginning of an era of profound transformation for Rome. As Caesar's legions streamed southward through Italy, the strategic calculations of Pompey and his senatorial allies shifted dramatically. Recognizing the inability to effectively defend Rome, or the Italian peninsula against Caesar's rapid and determined advance, a momentous decision was made. Pompey chose to abandon Italy entirely, a move that stunned many in Rome and beyond. His reasoning was sound, although unpopular at the time. He possessed significant influence and resources in the East, particularly in Greece, where he could leverage his vast network of clients and allies to raise a formidable army. This decision meant that Caesar was able to enter Rome without a single major battle. The capital, the ancient heart of the Republic, fell into his hands not through siege or bloody assault, but by default. This bloodless occupation was a testament to Pompey's strategic retreat, which prioritized the long-term goal of gathering strength over the immediate defense of the city. While it allowed Caesar a symbolic victory, it also meant that the true confrontation was merely postponed, relocated to a different theatre. Upon taking Rome, Caesar acted quickly to consolidate his position. He sought to project an image of order and legitimacy, preventing looting and ensuring the basic functions of government continued. He also secured the state treasury, a vital resource for funding the ongoing war. However, his hold on Rome was tenuous as long as Pompey remained at large, assembling a powerful force in the east. The strategic imperative for Caesar was clear. He could not allow Pompey to establish a strong base from which to launch a counteroffensive. Thus began Caesar's relentless pursuit across the Adriatic Sea. This was a challenging undertaking as Pompey controlled a larger and more experienced fleet, making the crossing inherently risky. Caesar faced the daunting task of transporting his legions across a sea dominated by his enemy's navy. The sea voyage itself was fraught with peril, not only from potential naval engagements, but also from the unpredictable nature of the elements. Caesar managed to ferry a portion of his army across the Adriatic in a daring operation, landing on the shores of Epirus in Greece. This initial landing was a critical step, establishing a foothold on the mainland. However, the crossing was difficult and piecemeal, leaving a significant portion of his forces stranded on the Italian side, unable to immediately join him. This division of his army presented a considerable logistical challenge and a strategic vulnerability, as Pompey's forces in Greece were already well established and numerous. The pursuit across the Adriatic marked a new and perilous phase of the civil war, moving the conflict from the familiar lands of Italy to the rugged and distant terrain of Greece, where the decisive confrontation between the two greatest generals of their age would ultimately unfold. The long pursuit across the Adriatic, the strategic manoeuvres in Thessaly, and the tense waiting finally culminated in the summer of 48 BCE on the plains near Pharsalus. Here, the two greatest Roman generals of their era, Julius Caesar and Gnaeus Pompey Magnus, would meet in a climactic encounter that would decide the fate of the Republic. Pompey commanded a considerably larger army, bolstered by legions from the east, and a substantial cavalry force, outnumbering Caesar's veterans. Yet, Caesar's legions, though fewer in number, were hardened by years of campaigning in Gaul and fiercely loyal to their commander. As the armies arrayed themselves, the tension on the field would have been palpable. Yet Pompey's strategy relied heavily on his superior cavalry to outflank Caesar's right wing and then roll up his infantry. Caesar, with his keen understanding of battlefield dynamics and the strengths of his own men, anticipated this move. He deployed a hidden fourth line of infantry, positioned specifically to counter Pompey's cavalry charge. This was a masterstroke of tactical genius, a deviation from standard Roman battle formations, and it proved to be the decisive factor. As the battle commenced, Pompey's cavalry indeed charged, sweeping around Caesar's right flank as predicted. However, instead of finding an exposed and vulnerable infantry line, they were met by Caesar's concealed fourth line. These seasoned legionaries, ordered to thrust their pila, their heavy javelins, then directly into the faces of the enemy horsemen rather than throwing them, caused chaos and disarray amongst Pompey's cavalry. The unexpected resistance combined with the terrifying nature of the attack broke the charge. Pompey's cavalry scattered, leaving his left flank exposed and vulnerable. With the cavalry routed, Caesar unleashed his own cavalry, now free to pursue the fleeing horsemen and, crucially, to attack Pompey's unprotected left flank. Simultaneously, Caesar's main infantry lines pressed forward with unwavering discipline and ferocity. The combination of the successful counter-cavalry tactic and the relentless pressure from Caesar's veteran legions began to overwhelm Pompey's forces. The battle devolved into a rout. Pompey's larger army, once seemingly invincible, began to disintegrate under the relentless assault. The senatorial legions, many of whom were less experienced than Caesar's veterans, lost cohesion and broke formation. Pompey himself, witnessing the catastrophic collapse of his army, abandoned the field. The victory at Pharsalus was absolute and devastating for Pompey. It effectively shattered his power base, dispersed his legions, and marked the turning point of the civil war. While the conflict would continue in various theatres, the overwhelming triumph at Pharsalus firmly established Caesar as the dominant military and political force in the Roman world. The Republic, as it had been known, had fought its last major battle and was now irrevocably altered. Following the devastating defeat at Pharsalus, Pompey, once the most powerful man in Rome, became a fugitive. With his legions shattered and his political allies dispersed, he sought refuge in Egypt, a client kingdom of Rome. The young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, along with his regents, was embroiled in a dynastic struggle against his older sister, Cleopatra VII. Pompey believed he would find sanctuary and support there, having previously acted as a patron to Ptolemy's father. However, the Egyptian court, calculating the shifting winds of Roman power, made a cold and pragmatic decision. They concluded that Pompey's continued presence would only draw Caesar's wrath upon Egypt. To appease the victorious general and avoid Roman intervention in their internal affairs, they decided to eliminate Pompey. As he disembarked from his ship near Pelusium in September 48 BCE, Pompey was greeted not with hospitality but with treachery. He was brutally assassinated by agents of Ptolemy XIII, beheaded on the shore, his body left unburied. Caesar, meanwhile, was in hot pursuit. He arrived in Alexandria a few days after Pompey's murder, expecting to confront his rival. Instead, he was presented with Pompey's severed head and signet ring. Far from being pleased by this act, Caesar was reportedly horrified and deeply saddened. Despite their bitter rivalry, Pompey had once been his son-in-law and a fellow Roman general. Caesar saw the assassination not as a service to him, but as an act of barbarity and a violation of Roman tradition, as well as a usurpation of his own right to dispense justice to a Roman citizen. His presence in Egypt quickly drew him into the ongoing dynastic dispute between Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra. Caesar, with his characteristic boldness, occupied the royal palace and began to mediate between the warring siblings. Cleopatra, realizing the importance of gaining Caesar's support, famously had herself smuggled into the palace, reportedly wrapped in a rug, to meet with him personally. Her intelligence, charm, and ambition quickly captivated Caesar. He decided to back Cleopatra's claim to the throne, a decision that plunged him and his small contingent of Roman forces into a difficult and protracted conflict known as the Alexandrian War. This entanglement in Egyptian affairs, driven by political calculation and personal connection, would consume Caesar for several months. His alliance with Cleopatra marked the beginning of a profound relationship, both politically and personally, that would have significant implications for both Rome and Egypt. Caesar's decision to support Cleopatra plunged him into the Alexandrian War, a conflict far more challenging than he might have initially anticipated. With only a small force of around 4,000 men, he found himself besieged in the royal quarter of Alexandria by the forces loyal to Ptolemy XIII. The fighting was fierce and protracted, often taking place in the narrow streets and canals of the city. During one particularly desperate engagement, Caesar himself was forced to swim to safety, reportedly discarding his cloak to avoid capture. The Great Library of Alexandria, a beacon of ancient knowledge, suffered significant damage during this period, a sombre casualty of the conflict. Despite the difficult circumstances, Caesar's military genius eventually prevailed. Reinforcements arrived, and in March 47 BCE, he decisively defeated Ptolemy XIII's army at the Battle of the Nile, and Ptolemy himself drowned during the retreat, bringing an end to the direct threat to Caesar and Cleopatra. With Ptolemy XIII removed, Caesar solidified Cleopatra's position as the undisputed Queen of Egypt. He appointed her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, as her co-ruler, ensuring a semblance of stability under Roman influence. During this period, Caesar and Cleopatra's relationship deepened. Egypt, with its ancient mysteries, its vibrant culture, and its profound history, offered a stark contrast to the stern realities of Roman politics. The allure of the Nile, the majestic pyramids, and the rich traditions of the pharaohs must have presented a fascinating diversion for the seasoned Roman general. Cleopatra herself was a woman of exceptional intellect, fluent in several languages, and possessed a keen understanding of politics and diplomacy. She was not merely a romantic interest, but a formidable ally who could offer Caesar invaluable resources and influence in the East. In June 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Ptolemy Caesar, affectionately known as Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. This child was widely understood to be Julius Caesar's son, a powerful symbol of their union. While Caesar was already a father to a daughter, Julia, Caesarion represented a unique extension of his lineage, though he never formally acknowledged him as his heir in Rome. For several months after the war, Caesar lingered in Egypt, taking a leisurely cruise up the Nile with Cleopatra, immersing himself in the exotic landscape and the unique rhythms of Egyptian life, before the pressing demands of the wider Roman world called him away once more. Despite his triumph in Egypt, the civil war was far from over. Significant Optimate forces, led by prominent figures such as Cato the Younger and Metellus Scipio, had regrouped in Africa, drawing strength from the local Roman provinces and allied kings. Caesar understood that his control over the Roman world would remain precarious as long as these formidable adversaries maintained a military presence. Thus, after a brief return to Rome to stabilize affairs, he embarked on another campaign, this time across the Mediterranean to the North African coast. The African campaign culminated in the decisive Battle of Thapsus in April 46 BCE. Caesar's legions, seasoned by years of conflict, faced a formidable coalition that included elephants, a weapon that had often caused consternation amongst Roman troops. However, Caesar's tactical brilliance once again shone through. He devised specific countermeasures against the elephants, and his disciplined legions executed their movements with precision. The battle was a crushing defeat for the Optimate forces. Many prominent leaders, including Metellus Scipio, perished, and Cato the Younger famously chose to take his own life rather than fall into Caesar's hands. The victory at Thapsus marked a significant turning point, effectively dismantling the organized resistance of the senatorial faction in Africa. Yet, even after Thapsus, the embers of opposition continued to smoulder. Pompey's sons, Gnaeus Pompey the Younger, and Sextus Pompey, along with other Optimate commanders, had managed to rally a substantial army in Hispania, modern-day Spain. This region, with its long history of Roman military presence, proved to be a fertile ground for recruiting new legions and consolidating resistance. Caesar, weary but resolute, had to embark on yet another arduous journey, crossing the Mediterranean for the final confrontation of the Civil War. The last major battle of the Civil War took place at Munda in March 45 BCE. This engagement proved to be one of the most difficult and fiercely contested of Caesar's career. His legions faced a desperate and determined enemy, fighting with the knowledge that their cause was nearing its end. The battle raged for hours, and at one point Caesar himself reportedly dismounted and fought in the front lines to inspire his wavering troops. The sheer ferocity of the fighting pushed both sides to their limits. Ultimately, Caesar's superior generalship and the unwavering discipline of his veteran legions secured a hard-won victory. Gnaeus Pompey the Younger was killed, and Sextus Pompey fled, though he would resurface years later. The Battle of Munda effectively extinguished the last significant flames of resistance to Caesar's sole authority, solidifying his unprecedented control over the entirety of the Roman world. He could now return to Rome not merely as a victor, but as its undisputed master. With the last vestiges of civil war resistance quelled, Julius Caesar returned to Rome in 45 BCE, not as a desperate general on the run, but as the undisputed master of the Roman world. It was a moment of profound significance, or one that demanded a spectacle befitting his extraordinary achievements. The Senate, now largely subservient to his will, decreed a series of magnificent triumphs, not one, but 4 distinct celebrations, held on different days, each commemorating a specific campaign. This was an unprecedented display, designed to awe and impress the populace, a testament to the immense power Caesar now wielded. The first triumph celebrated his conquest of Gaul, a monumental undertaking that had added vast new territories and riches to the Roman Republic. This procession would have featured vivid depictions of Gallic landscapes, captured chieftains, and immense quantities of gold and silver plundered from the barbarian tribes. The air would have been thick with the cheers of the crowds, celebrating the expansion of Roman dominion. Following this, what a triumph was dedicated to his victory in Egypt. This procession was more exotic, showcasing the treasures and symbols of the ancient Nile kingdom. Images of the Sphinx and pyramids, along with the captured regalia of the Ptolemaic dynasty, would have paraded through the streets. Though Cleopatra herself was not present, her younger sister, Arsinoe IV, was led in chains, a stark reminder of Caesar's decisive intervention in the dynastic struggles of Egypt. The third triumph commemorated his victory in Africa, specifically the defeat of the Optimate forces at Thapsus. While the civil war aspect of this campaign was carefully downplayed to maintain a facade of unity, the display focused on the defeat of Juba I of Numidia, an allied king who had supported Caesar's enemies. Exotic animals from Africa, perhaps even elephants, would have been part of this grand procession, symbolizing the distant lands brought under Roman influence. Finally, the fourth triumph celebrated his decisive victory in Hispania, particularly the Battle of Munda. This was perhaps the most sensitive of the 4, as it marked the defeat of fellow Romans, albeit those who had opposed Caesar. To mitigate this, the triumph emphasized the subjugation of rebellious Spanish tribes who had sided with Pompey's sons, rather than directly celebrating the defeat of Roman citizens. Each triumph was a meticulously orchestrated event, a grand procession that wound its way through the sacred Via Sacra to the Capitoline Hill. Caesar, adorned in triumphal robes, rode in a magnificent chariot, preceded by senators, magistrates, and the spoils of war, and followed by his loyal legions, who chanted their traditional songs and jests. These celebrations were more than mere parades. They were potent symbolic acts, projecting an image of unparalleled military genius and divine favour, firmly cementing Caesar's preeminent position in the Roman world. The sheer scale and opulence of these triumphs were designed to leave an indelible impression, a testament to the singular authority of Gaius Julius Caesar. Having returned to Rome, celebrated his extraordinary triumphs, and solidified his position as the most powerful individual in the Republic, Caesar began to systematically accumulate an array of powers that fundamentally altered the traditional structure of Roman governance. The Senate, now largely composed of his loyalists and intimidated by his military might, readily granted him unprecedented authority. He was repeatedly elected to the consulship, holding the office for 5 consecutive years, effectively monopolizing the highest executive position. Beyond this, he was granted tribunician power, which conferred inviolability and the right to veto any act of a magistrate or the Senate, without actually holding the office of tribune of the plebs, an office traditionally reserved for plebeians. This effectively removed a crucial check on his authority. He also received the title of Praefectus Morum, or Prefect of Morals, which allowed him to control the census and the enrollment of senators and equities, giving him immense influence over the composition of the Roman elite. Furthermore, Caesar was appointed Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, a position he had held since 63 BCE, and granting him significant religious authority and control over the Roman calendar. However, the most profound and ultimately most controversial step in this accumulation of power came in February of 44 BCE, when the Senate bestowed upon him the title of Dictator Perpetuo, or Dictator in Perpetuity. This was a radical departure from Roman tradition. The office of dictator had existed for centuries, but it was always a temporary measure, granted only in times of extreme crisis, typically for a period of 6 months and never for life. A dictator was meant to restore order and then relinquish power. By accepting the title of Dictator Perpetuo, Caesar signalled an intention to permanently reshape the Roman state, moving away from the republican ideal of rotating magistracies and shared power. It implied a permanent, yet a centralized authority residing in one man, an authority that superseded all other traditional offices. This appointment was a clear and unambiguous challenge to the very foundation of the Roman Republic, which valued liberty and the rule of law above the absolute power of any single individual. The implications were profound. It suggested that the Republic, as it had been known, was at an end, replaced by a system where one man held ultimate, unchallenged authority, potentially paving the way for a monarchy, a concept deeply abhorrent to the Roman aristocratic class. The title itself, Dictator in Perpetuity, resonated with the ominous finality, suggesting an unyielding grip on power that would endure indefinitely. With the vast powers now concentrated in his hands, Caesar embarked upon an ambitious and far-reaching program of reforms, intending to address the numerous deep-seated issues that had plagued the Roman state for decades. His vision was to create a more efficient, stable, and prosperous Rome, reflecting his own administrative genius and imperial perspective. One of his primary concerns was the administration of the vast Roman territories. He sought to bring greater order and accountability to the provincial governors, who often enriched themselves at the expense of the local populations. Caesar introduced measures to curb extortion and corruption, requiring governors to submit detailed financial accounts and limiting their terms of office. He also extended Roman citizenship to various communities in Gaul and Hispania, integrating them more fully into the Roman political and social fabric, a policy that broadened the base of Roman power and loyalty beyond Italy. Economically, Caesar aimed to stabilize the turbulent Roman finances and address the widespread poverty that fueled unrest. He initiated a significant debt relief program, not by outright cancellation, but by allowing debtors to pay off their obligations at pre-Civil War valuations, which offered substantial relief without entirely undermining the system of credit. He also reformed the coinage, introducing new gold and silver issues to standardize the currency and facilitate trade across the empire. To alleviate unemployment among the urban poor, a persistent problem in Rome, Caesar launched extensive public works projects. These projects were also central to his plans for urban renewal within Rome itself. The city had grown chaotically, suffering from overcrowding, poor infrastructure, and a lack of monumental grandeur befitting the capital of an empire. Caesar envisioned a transformed Rome, a city that would reflect the glory and stability of his new order. He initiated plans for a new forum, known as the Forum of Caesar, which would include a temple dedicated to Venus Genetrix, his divine ancestress. This grand architectural undertaking aimed to ease congestion in the old Roman Forum while simultaneously serving as a powerful symbol of his lineage and authority. Further plans included the draining of the Pontine marshes to create arable land, the construction of a new port at Ostia to improve grain supply, and the reorganization of the city's water distribution system. These were not merely cosmetic improvements, but fundamental infrastructural changes designed to enhance the quality of life for Rome's inhabitants and to project an image of a well-ordered, forward-looking state under his singular leadership. His reforms touched almost every aspect of Roman life, from law and governance to economics and urban planning, all reflecting a comprehensive attempt to rebuild and rationalize the sprawling Roman world under his guiding hand. Among Caesar's many reforms, one stands out for its enduring legacy and profound impact on daily life, stretching far beyond the confines of the Roman world, the reform of the calendar. Before Caesar's intervention, the Roman calendar was a complicated, often chaotic system, prone to significant inaccuracies and political manipulation. It was a lunar-based calendar, theoretically consisting of 355 days, but to keep it roughly aligned with the solar year, an intercalary month, called Mercedonius, was supposed to be inserted periodically by the pontiffs. However, this intercalation was often neglected or abused. Pontiffs, who were responsible for managing the calendar, sometimes added or omitted months for political reasons, extending or shortening the terms of magistrates or delaying elections. Consequently, by Caesar's time, the Roman calendar had drifted significantly out of sync with the actual seasons. Festivals were celebrated at the wrong times of year, and farmers struggled to plan their agricultural activities effectively. When Caesar returned from his campaigns in Egypt, where he had observed the more accurate Egyptian solar calendar, he recognized the urgent need for a fundamental overhaul. He enlisted the help of Sosigenes of Alexandria, an astronomer, to devise a new, more precise calendar. The result was the Julian calendar, a solar calendar based on a year of 365 days, with an extra day added every 4 years to account for the Earth's orbital period of approximately 365.25 days. This intercalary day was inserted in February, becoming what we now know as a leap day. To correct the accumulated error from the old system, Caesar declared that the year 46 BCE, known as the last year of confusion, would have 445 days, effectively bringing the calendar back into alignment with the seasons. The new Julian calendar was a monumental achievement in practical astronomy and administration. It provided a consistent, predictable, and remarkably accurate measure of time that was easily understood and applied. Its adoption brought stability and uniformity to dating across the vast Roman Empire, simplifying administration, commerce, and religious observances. For centuries, the Julian calendar served as the standard for much of the Western world, providing a foundational structure for recording history and organizing daily life. Its principles continued to govern timekeeping until the Gregorian reform in the 16th century, a testament to the scientific foresight and practical genius embedded within Caesar's vision. Beyond the precise calibration of time, Caesar also sought to redefine the very fabric of Roman society through his policies on citizenship and the strategic expansion of Roman influence. Historically, Roman citizenship was a coveted status, often granted selectively and used as a tool of political control. Caesar, however, adopted a more expansive and inclusive approach, particularly towards the peoples he had conquered and those who had demonstrated loyalty to him. A significant aspect of this policy involved extending Roman citizenship to various communities, especially in Gaul. After his extensive campaigns and the pacification of the region, Caesar recognized the value of integrating the Gallic elite into the Roman system. Granting citizenship was not merely an act of benevolence. It was a pragmatic strategy to secure loyalty, foster stability, and integrate newly acquired territories more firmly into the Roman sphere. By offering the rights and privileges of Roman citizenship, he aimed to bind these communities to Rome, transforming potential adversaries into invested partners. This gradual assimilation contrasted with earlier, as more rigid Roman policies and laid the groundwork for a more unified and extensive empire. Furthermore, Caesar embarked on ambitious plans for colonization, both within Italy and in the provinces. He established numerous colonies, settling many of his veteran soldiers in new towns across Gaul, Hispania, and Africa. These settlements served multiple purposes. They provided land and livelihoods for his loyal legions, helping to prevent discontent among discharged soldiers. They acted as centres for Romanization, spreading Roman culture, language, and administration into conquered territories, and they facilitated economic development by cultivating new agricultural lands and establishing trade routes. These colonial ventures were not simply about military presence. They were integral to Caesar's broader vision of a powerful and unified Roman state. He aimed to alleviate overcrowding and poverty in Rome by redistributing populations and creating new opportunities in the provinces. His policies extended beyond simply granting citizenship. They involved a deliberate strategy of urban development and cultural integration. Through these actions, Caesar was actively shaping the future of the Roman world, envisioning an empire where Roman identity was not confined to Italy, but diffused across a vast network of loyal citizens and thriving communities, all bound together under the overarching authority of Rome. This expansive approach marked a significant shift in Roman imperial strategy, laying foundations that would be built upon by his successors. As Caesar consolidated his power, his vision for Rome extended beyond administrative efficiency and political unity. He also sought to physically transform the city itself. Recognizing the importance of monumental architecture and practical infrastructure, he initiated an ambitious program of public works designed to beautify Rome and modernize its essential services. These projects not only served functional purposes, but also subtly reinforced his authority and demonstrated his commitment to the welfare and grandeur of the Roman people. Among his most notable undertakings was the construction of the Forum Iulium, or Caesar's Forum. This grand complex was intended to relieve congestion in the Roman Forum, which had become increasingly crowded and inadequate for the city's burgeoning administrative and commercial needs. The Forum Iulium featured a central plaza, surrounded by porticos and dominated by the magnificent temple of Venus Genetrix, a deity from whom Caesar claimed direct descent. The temple served as a powerful symbol, linking his personal lineage to the divine and imbuing his rule with a sense of sacred legitimacy. This new forum provided additional space for legal and commercial activities, reflecting his desire to streamline urban life and create a more orderly capital. Beyond new forums and temples, Caesar also focused on improving Rome's fundamental infrastructure. He initiated projects to enhance the city's drainage systems, recognizing the need for better sanitation and flood control in a densely populated urban environment. Plans were also conceived for the dredging of the Tiber River, aiming to improve navigation and reduce the risk of flooding, which had long plagued the lower parts of Rome. These practical improvements underscored his attention to the daily lives of Roman citizens, demonstrating a ruler deeply concerned with the tangible well-being of the populace. Further proposed endeavours included the construction of a new Senate house, the Curia Julia, which was eventually completed by his successors. His vision for Rome was one of a magnificent capital, not merely a functional city, but a true centre of imperial power, adorned with splendid architecture and equipped with modern amenities. Through these extensive public works, Caesar aimed to leave an indelible mark on Rome, reshaping its urban landscape to reflect the new order he was establishing, creating a capital worthy of an expanding empire and solidifying his legacy as a transformative builder. These projects were a testament to his ambition to create a more efficient, beautiful, and enduring Rome. Amidst his extensive reforms and grand building projects, one of Caesar's most distinctive and widely discussed policies was his approach to his defeated adversaries. Following the brutal civil wars, he adopted a deliberate strategy of clemency, a stark departure from the traditional Roman practice of vanquishing political opponents, exemplified most harshly by Sulla's infamous proscriptions decades earlier. Instead of enacting widespread retribution, Caesar chose a path of mercy and reconciliation, seeking to heal the deep wounds inflicted by years of internal conflict. This policy was not merely an act of personal generosity, it was a calculated political maneuver aimed at unifying a fractured Roman state under his leadership. As Caesar understood that a regime built on fear and vengeance would be inherently unstable, perpetually threatened by lingering resentment and the desire for counter-retribution. By granting pardons to many who had fought against him, including prominent senators and equites, he hoped to disarm their hostility and integrate them back into the political fabric of Rome. This act of forgiveness was often surprising to those who had expected a far more severe fate. Numerous individuals who had actively opposed Caesar, or even commanded forces against him, found themselves not on a list for execution, but rather offered a chance to return to public life, albeit under Caesar's ultimate authority. Cicero, for instance, a vocal critic of Caesar and a supporter of Pompey, was allowed to return to Rome and resume his literary pursuits. The other figures, such as Marcus Brutus and Gaius Cassius, who would later play pivotal roles in his assassination, were not only pardoned but also received positions of trust and authority within Caesar's administration. This policy of clemency was a bold experiment in statecraft. It aimed to foster a sense of shared purpose and allegiance to the new order, rather than perpetuating cycles of violence and vendetta. Caesar believed that by demonstrating magnanimity, he could secure loyalty and stability more effectively than through terror. He sought to create an environment where former enemies could envision a future within his system, rather than being driven to further opposition by desperation. While this approach was widely lauded by many as humane and progressive, it also carried inherent risks, as some of those who benefited from his mercy harboured unyielding republican convictions and deep-seated resentments that even clemency could not entirely extinguish. Despite the impressive scope of his reforms, the visible signs of a unified Rome, and his calculated policy of clemency, a subtle yet persistent undercurrent of unease began to stir within certain segments of Roman society, particularly among the senatorial aristocracy and those who clung fiercely to traditional republican ideals. This simmering discontent was not always overt, but it grew steadily, fueled by a profound apprehension regarding Caesar's seemingly limitless power and his increasingly monarchical bearing. The very accumulation of his many titles, Dictator Perpetuo, Pontifex Maximus, and numerous consulships represented a radical departure from the long-held principles of the Republic, where power was meant to be shared, temporary, and subject to checks and balances. To these traditionalists, Caesar's ascendancy felt less like the restoration of order and more like the imposition of a tyranny, however benevolent it might appear on the surface. They observed his reforms, his public works, and his extensions of citizenship not as acts of enlightened governance, but as instruments designed to consolidate personal authority and diminish the influence of the Senate. A particular source of anxiety was Caesar's perceived disregard for the established customs and dignities of the Senate. While he expanded its numbers, he also often bypassed its traditional deliberative processes, enacting legislation directly or through popular assemblies. His personal authority overshadowed the collective wisdom of the senators, leading to a sense of emasculation among those who believed themselves to be the rightful guardians of Roman liberty. Instances where senators were kept waiting to see him, or where he received them while seated rather than rising as custom dictated, were seen as deliberate affronts, symbolic of a new, autocratic order. Furthermore, his public appearances and the honours bestowed upon him, such as statues in the temples and the right to wear triumphal attire in the Senate, began to evoke comparisons to Hellenistic kings rather than a Roman magistrate. Such displays, while perhaps intended to impress and inspire, only deepened the fears of those who saw the Republic being slowly but inexorably eroded. The spectre of an absolute monarch, an anathema to the Roman ethos for centuries, began to loom large in the minds of many, fostering a quiet but growing resolve to resist what they perceived as the ultimate threat to Roman freedom. These quiet anxieties, initially suppressed by Caesar's overwhelming success and presence, would eventually coalesce into a far more dangerous opposition. The subtle disquiet that had begun to permeate Roman society eventually found a more concrete focus in persistent rumours and growing suspicions concerning Caesar's ultimate ambition, the aspiration to become king. For centuries, the very word king had been anathema in Rome, associated with the tyranny of Tarquin the Proud and the end of the monarchy, an event deeply ingrained in the Roman psyche as the birth of their republic. Any suggestion that a Roman leader might seek to revive this ancient form of rule was met with profound hostility and fear. These murmurs gained considerable traction due to several incidents, each contributing to the perception that Caesar harboured kingly desires. The most significant and public of these occurrences unfolded during the ancient festival of the Lupercalia in February of 44 BCE. On this day, as part of the traditional ceremonies, a prominent figure, Mark Antony, who was Caesar's co-consul and a staunch supporter, approached Caesar while he was seated on his golden chair, presiding over the festivities. Antony, draped in the traditional Lupercalian garb, made a deliberate and public gesture. He offered Caesar a diadem, a symbol unmistakably associated with royalty. The crowd's reaction was a mix of confusion and a muted, uncomfortable silence. Caesar, for his part, initially pushed the diadem away, and the crowd responded with a faint ripple of applause. Antony persisted, offering it a second time. Again, Caesar refused, this time with a more definitive gesture, and the applause from the gathered Romans grew louder, a clear indication of their aversion to the symbol of kingship. This public rejection of the diadem, while seemingly a demonstration of humility and respect for republican traditions, was interpreted in various ways. To some, it confirmed Caesar's republican loyalty, proving he had no intention of becoming a king. To others, however, it was a carefully orchestrated piece of political theatre, a test of public opinion designed to gauge how far he could push the boundaries of his power. The very act of offering, and the public spectacle surrounding it, only intensified the existing suspicions, It forced the question of kingship into the open, making it a topic of anxious discussion throughout the city. The incident at the Lupercalia, therefore, served to crystallize the fears of many. It became a potent symbol in the minds of those who believed Caesar was covertly aiming for absolute rule. It fueled the narrative that he was not merely content with being the preeminent citizen, but sought to transform the Republic into a monarchy, a transformation they were determined to prevent at all costs. The seeds of discontent, now fertilized by these kingly rumours, began to sprout into a more dangerous form of opposition. As the apprehension surrounding Caesar's perceived monarchical ambitions deepened, a clandestine movement began to coalesce among those who felt the Republic was in peril. From this growing discontent, a conspiracy started to take shape, drawing together individuals from various backgrounds, united by their profound unease. Among the most prominent figures to emerge within this nascent group were Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus. Brutus, descended from a family with a venerable republican legacy, was widely respected for his intellectual pursuits and his adherence to Stoic philosophy. His ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, was revered as one of the founders of the Roman Republic, credited with expelling the last king of Rome. This lineage placed a heavy mantle of expectation upon Marcus Brutus, who, despite having initially supported Pompey against Caesar in the civil war, had been treated with remarkable clemency by Caesar after Pharsalus, and even elevated to a significant magistracy. However, for Brutus, the personal favour shown by Caesar could not outweigh what he perceived as a fundamental threat to the very principles of Roman governance. His motivations were largely rooted in a deep-seated republican idealism, a belief that the liberty of Rome was sacrosanct and could not endure under the sway of a single, all-powerful individual. He saw Caesar's ascendancy as an existential threat to the delicate balance of power that defined the Republic. Gaius Cassius Longinus, on the other hand, was known for his fierce temperament and a more direct, pragmatic approach to political action. Like Brutus, Cassius had fought against Caesar in the civil war and had also received Caesar's clemency. Yet, unlike Brutus, Cassius harboured more explicit personal grievances against Caesar, having been overshadowed and, in his view, slighted by the dictator. Beyond personal animosity, Cassius shared Brutus's profound concern for the Republic. He was a man of strong convictions, deeply committed to the traditional Roman way of life, and utterly convinced that Caesar's unchecked power would lead inevitably to tyranny. His fear for the Republic's future was palpable, believing that swift and decisive action was necessary to avert its complete collapse. These two men, along with a growing number of senators, equites, and even some of Caesar's former officers, formed the core of the conspiracy. Their motivations, while varying in their precise nuances, converged on a common point: the conviction that Caesar had become too powerful, that his perpetual dictatorship and kingly aspirations represented an intolerable transgression against the spirit and letter of Roman republicanism. They believed that by removing Caesar, they would restore the Republic and avert the complete subjugation of Roman liberty. The stage was thus quietly set for a dramatic and irreversible act in the heart of Rome. As the fateful date of March 15th, 44 BCE drew nearer, an unsettling atmosphere seemed to settle over Rome. The air was thick with a quiet tension, punctuated by a series of events and warnings that, in hindsight, appeared to be portents of an impending tragedy. For many, these occurrences were merely coincidences, but for others they spoke of a deeper, more ominous pattern. Among the most well-known of these premonitions was the warning delivered by a soothsayer, or a diviner named Spurinna. He had reportedly cautioned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. This cryptic message delivered in the public forum was initially met with Caesar's characteristic dismissiveness. He was a man of action, a pragmatist who placed little stock in such superstitious pronouncements, preferring to trust in his own formidable intellect and destiny. On the very morning of the Ides, as he passed Spurinna, Caesar reputedly quipped that the Ides had come, implying the danger had passed. To this, Spurinna is said to have calmly replied, "I, Caesar, but not gone." Further omens were reported in the days preceding the Ides. There were accounts of strange phenomena in the natural world, birds of ill omen appearing in the forum, unusual sacrifices yielding unfavourable signs, and even reports of a phantom army clashing in the skies. While such stories often gained traction in the superstitious climate of ancient Rome, they contributed to a pervasive sense of unease, particularly among those already apprehensive about Caesar's unchecked power. Even within Caesar's own household, a sense of foreboding grew. His wife, Calpurnia, was deeply troubled by a series of vivid dreams on the night before the assassination. She reportedly dreamt of Caesar being murdered in her arms and of their house collapsing. So disturbed was she by these visions that she pleaded with Caesar not to attend the Senate meeting scheduled for that day. Her pleas, rare and earnest, were supported by some of Caesar's closest friends, who also sensed an unspoken danger. Despite these numerous warnings, both public and private, as Caesar maintained his stoic and somewhat disdainful attitude. He was not a man easily swayed by fear or superstition. His unwavering confidence, forged through countless military campaigns and political triumphs, had perhaps rendered him impervious to such anxieties. He believed in his own fate, in his star, and in his ability to navigate any challenge. He felt secure, surrounded by those he had pardoned, seemingly invincible in his power. This resolute dismissal of the accumulating signs contributed to a quiet, almost melancholic inevitability surrounding the events that were about to unfold. His journey towards the theatre of Pompey on that clear March morning was therefore not merely a walk to a Senate session, but an inexorable movement towards a destiny he had been repeatedly yet fruitlessly warned about. And the morning of the Ides of March, 44 BCE, found Julius Caesar making his way towards the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate was convened. The usual Senate house was undergoing repairs, making this grand edifice, built by his former rival, the temporary seat of Roman governance. A sense of normalcy, at least outwardly, pervaded the scene, yet beneath the surface a profound tension simmered. As Caesar approached, he was met by various citizens and petitioners, eager to gain his attention. Among them, some attempted to hand him scrolls containing warnings of the plot against him. One man, Artemidorus, a Greek philosopher, reportedly pressed a scroll into Caesar's hand, urging him to read it immediately, as it contained vital information for his safety. Caesar, however, accustomed to receiving numerous petitions, merely placed it with others he intended to read later, perhaps after the Senate's proceedings. This small, seemingly insignificant act sealed his immediate fate. Upon entering the theatre of Pompey, Caesar proceeded to his gilded chair, a symbol of his unprecedented authority, placed prominently at the head of the assembly. The senators were already gathered, a mix of genuine allies, those who merely tolerated his rule, and the conspirators themselves, their faces carefully composed to betray no hint of their deadly intent. The air, though seemingly ordinary, carried an unspoken weight, a subtle tremor that only the most perceptive might have discerned. The conspirators, numbering around 60, had meticulously planned their positions. They had arranged themselves so that they would be close to Caesar, unable to act swiftly and decisively when the moment arrived. Each man carried a dagger concealed beneath his toga, their hearts undoubtedly pounding with a mixture of fear, conviction, and desperate resolve. They were driven by a complex blend of motives, a fervent belief in the Republic's ideals, personal grievances, and a deep-seated fear of Caesar's perceived ambition to become an absolute monarch. As Caesar took his seat, the conspirators began to gather around him, their movements seemingly casual, creating a tight circle. One of them, Lucius Tullius Cimber, approached Caesar with a petition, ostensibly seeking the recall of his exiled brother. This was the prearranged signal. As Cimber made his appeal, the other conspirators slowly closed in, their eyes fixed on Caesar, awaiting the moment to strike. The stage was set, not for a legislative debate, but for a violent culmination of fear, ambition, and a desperate struggle for the soul of the Roman Republic. The quiet hum of the assembled senators, the rustle of togas, and the low murmurs of conversation seemed to hold their breath, unknowingly poised on the brink of an irreversible historical turning point. As Lucius Tullius Cimber pressed his petition, tugging at Caesar's toga, the signal was given. Suddenly, Publius Servilius Casca struck the first blow, a glancing stab to Caesar's neck. The attack was clumsy, fueled by a mixture of terror and adrenaline. Caesar, momentarily stunned, cried out and attempted to defend himself, even managing to stab Casca in the arm with his stylus. The suddenness of the assault, the immediate visceral shock, sent a ripple of horror through the assembled senators who were not part of the plot. The scene erupted into chaos. The other conspirators, emboldened by the initial strike, surged forward, each eager to play their part in what they believed was a righteous act for the Republic. Daggers flashed in the dim light of the Senate chamber. Caesar, surrounded, found himself overwhelmed. He struggled, attempting to push back his attackers, but the sheer number of assailants and the confined space made resistance futile. He was a formidable warrior, yet this was not a battlefield. This was a betrayal, a close-quarters ambush by men he had, in many cases, pardoned and elevated. As the blows rained down, Caesar's initial struggle gave way to a dawning, terrible realization. His eyes, once so sharp and commanding, began to reflect not just pain, wound, but a profound sense of shock and disbelief. He saw the faces of men he knew, men he had trusted, now contorted with a desperate resolve to end his life. According to ancient accounts, it was then, seeing Marcus Junius Brutus among his attackers, that Caesar uttered his famous poignant words. While the precise phrasing is debated by historians, whether it was the Greek kaisou teknon, meaning "you too, my son," or the more widely recognized Latin et tu, brute, the essence remains the same, a profound expression of betrayal directed at a man he had deeply favoured and considered almost like a son. It was this final sight, the face of Brutus, that is said to have extinguished the last of Caesar's will to resist. With this realization, Caesar ceased his struggle. He pulled his toga over his head, a gesture of dignity and resignation, and choosing to meet his end with a semblance of privacy amidst the public horror. He fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, his former rival, a poignant and ironic final resting place. The blood flowed onto the base of the statue, symbolically mingling their fates. The attack continued until he lay lifeless, having suffered 23 wounds. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the preceding pandemonium, marking the abrupt and violent end of Rome's most powerful man. The immediate aftermath of Caesar's assassination was not the orderly re-establishment of the Republic that the conspirators had envisioned. Instead, a profound silence initially gripped the Senate chamber, quickly dissolving into a wave of panic. Senators not involved in the plot, witnessing the horrific spectacle, fled in terror. They scattered, pushing and shoving, desperate to escape the scene of violence, fearing for their own lives and uncertain of what further bloodshed might ensue. The suddenness and brutality of the act had shattered the decorum of the Roman Senate. Emerging from the theatre of Pompey, The conspirators, their hands still stained, made their way towards the forum. They held their daggers aloft, displaying them as symbols of their deed, convinced they had liberated Rome from a tyrant. Brutus, at the forefront, attempted to address the fleeing senators and the sparse onlookers, proclaiming freedom and the restoration of the Republic. He called out, urging them to rejoice, believing the Roman populace would greet their act with widespread acclaim and gratitude. However, the reaction from the city was not one of jubilation. News of Caesar's death spread through Rome like a ripple across a still pond, first whispers, then shouts, finally a growing clamour. The initial response was not understanding or support for the conspirators' ideals, but rather confusion and fear. The ordinary citizens of Rome had benefited from Caesar's rule. His reforms, his generosity and his victories had brought a sense of stability and prosperity after years of civil strife. To them, he was not a tyrant, but a champion. The Forum, usually a bustling hub of Roman life, began to empty. Shops closed, people retreated to their homes, and an eerie quiet descended upon the city's central square. The populace, uncertain of the conspirators' intentions or what the future might hold, reacted with apprehension rather than celebration. There was no immediate outpouring of support for the liberators. Instead, a palpable sense of unease settled over Rome. The conspirators, expecting to be hailed as heroes, found themselves met with suspicion and a chilling silence, a stark indication that their actions had not been universally welcomed by those they claimed to have saved. The city held its breath, suspended between the shock of the past and the uncertainty of what was to come. In the days following Caesar's assassination, an uneasy truce settled over Rome. The conspirators, wary of public backlash, had allowed Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant and consul, to deliver the funeral oration. This decision, intended to project an image of reconciliation and stability, would prove to be a profound miscalculation. Antony, a skilled orator and astute politician, seized this opportunity to subtly yet powerfully ignite the dormant affections of the Roman people for their fallen leader. On the day of the funeral, in the heart of the Forum, a vast crowd gathered. Antony began his speech with a seemingly neutral tone, acknowledging the conspirators' claims of patriotism. He presented himself not as an accuser, but as a mourner, a friend paying his last respects. He spoke of Caesar's accomplishments, his triumphs, his generosity, carefully reminding the populace of the benefits they had reaped under his rule. He mentioned Caesar's clemency, his refusal to execute enemies, and his dedication to the welfare of Rome. The true turning point in Antony's oration came with the reading of Caesar's will. With deliberate emphasis, now Antony revealed Caesar's posthumous gifts to the Roman people. Each citizen was to receive a substantial sum of money, and Caesar's vast private gardens on the far side of the Tiber were bequeathed to the public for their enjoyment. This revelation struck a deep chord with the common citizens, demonstrating Caesar's enduring care for their well-being, even beyond his death. The murmurs of the crowd began to shift, from passive listening to a growing sense of injustice. Then, with a dramatic flourish, Antony unveiled Caesar's blood-stained toga. He held it aloft for all to see, pointing to the rents in the fabric, each tear representing a stab wound inflicted by the conspirators. He described the moment of betrayal, painting a vivid picture of Caesar's final moments, emphasizing the cruelty and treachery of the act. He did not explicitly accuse the conspirators, but his words and actions skillfully evoked pity for Caesar and outrage against those who had murdered him. The sight of the blood-soaked garment, combined with the generosity of the will, transformed the crowd's sentiment. Their grief for Caesar now mingled with a burning anger towards his assassins, setting the stage for the tumultuous events that would follow. Amidst the escalating turmoil that followed Caesar's funeral, a new, unexpected figure began to emerge from the periphery of Roman politics. This was Gaius Octavius, Caesar's great-nephew, a young man of only 18 years. Prior to the assassination, Octavius had been quietly pursuing his studies in Apollonia, far from the bustling intrigues of Rome. He was a somewhat delicate youth. He was known more for his intellect and reserved demeanour than for any military prowess or overt ambition. However, upon receiving news of Caesar's death, and more importantly the contents of his will, Octavius's life irrevocably changed. Caesar had not only designated him as his principal heir, but had also formally adopted him, posthumously granting him the name Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. This adoption was a profound statement, elevating Octavius from a relatively obscure noble to the direct inheritor of Caesar's immense wealth, political legacy, and, crucially, his popular support. Octavian, as he was now known, immediately understood the weight of this inheritance. Despite warnings from his family and friends to reject the dangerous legacy, he resolved to accept it. His journey back to Rome was a deliberate and calculated act, and signalling his intent to claim what was rightfully his. Upon his arrival, he faced immediate challenges. Mark Antony, who had initially seized control of Caesar's assets, viewed the young Octavian with suspicion and disdain, seeing him as an inexperienced upstart who posed little threat to his own ambitions. Yet, Octavian displayed a shrewdness that belied his youth. He meticulously cultivated the loyalty of Caesar's veterans, appealing to their reverence for their fallen general and promising to fulfill the bequests outlined in Caesar's will, even if it meant using his own personal funds. He also began to skillfully leverage the immense popularity of Caesar's name, presenting himself as the legitimate successor and avenger of his adoptive father, as he understood the power of public perception and the deep emotional connection many Romans still felt for Caesar. Through a combination of strategic alliances, financial generosity, and an unwavering commitment to avenging Caesar, Octavian began to consolidate his position. His quiet determination and ability to navigate the treacherous political landscape surprised many, including Antony himself. The young Octavian, once an unknown student, was rapidly transforming into a formidable political force, poised to play a central role in the unfolding drama of post-Caesarian Rome. The initial rivalry between Octavian and Mark Antony, characterized by political maneuvering and even skirmishes, eventually gave way to a more pragmatic understanding. Both men recognized that their individual ambitions, while considerable, were best served by a temporary alliance against a common enemy. The conspirators who had murdered Caesar, particularly Brutus and Cassius, who had by this point consolidated their forces in the east. Thus, in 43 BCE, a momentous agreement was forged near Mutina, forming what historians refer to as the Second Triumvirate. This was a formal political alliance, legally recognized by a Roman law, the Lex Titia, which granted its members extraordinary powers for a period of 5 years. The three men who comprised this formidable new governing body were Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, a loyal former master of horse to Caesar, who commanded significant military forces. The stated purpose of the Second Triumvirate was twofold: to avenge Caesar's assassination and to restore order to a republic that had been destabilized by years of civil strife. However, the methods employed to achieve these goals were often ruthless and brutal. The triumvirs immediately turned their attention to eliminating their political opponents within Italy, a process known as the proscriptions. These proscriptions were essentially lists of individuals declared public enemies, whose property was confiscated and whose lives could be taken with impunity. The motives behind these lists were complex, driven by a desire for revenge against those who had supported the assassins or simply opposed the triumvirs, as well as a pressing need to fund their vast armies. Many prominent Romans, including Cicero, the eloquent orator who had publicly criticised Antony, found their names on these ominous lists. The period of proscriptions was marked by widespread fear and violence, as political scores were settled and fortunes were amassed through the seizure of property. This alliance, though born of necessity, fundamentally altered the political landscape of Rome. It demonstrated a willingness to cast aside traditional republican norms in favour of concentrated power, a clear departure from the ideals many claim to uphold. The formation of the Second Triumvirate marked a decisive step away from the old republic and towards a new, more autocratic form of governance, establishing a temporary yet powerful collective leadership that would shape the destiny of Rome for years to come. With their power solidified in Rome through the proscriptions, the members of the Second Triumvirate turned their full attention eastward, where Brutus and Cassius had gathered a substantial army, drawing support from various provinces and client kingdoms. These two leading conspirators against Caesar had established their base in Macedonia and Thrace, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. In 42 BCE, the two immense armies met on the plains near Philippi, a city in eastern Macedonia. The forces of the Triumvirate, primarily led by Mark Antony and Octavian, numbered approximately 19 legions, while Brutus and Cassius commanded a similarly large force. The stage was set for a decisive clash that would determine the fate of the Roman world. The Battle of Philippi was not a single engagement, but rather two distinct encounters fought within a few weeks of each other. In the first battle, Mark Antony's legions engaged Cassius's forces on the Triumvirate's right flank. Antony achieved a significant victory, overrunning Cassius's camp. Simultaneously, on the Triumvirate's left, Octavian's forces were less successful, being pushed back by Brutus's legions, and Octavian himself was forced to flee his camp. However, a critical miscommunication or misunderstanding occurred. Cassius, believing that Brutus's forces had also been defeated, and seeing his own lines crumbling, despaired and ordered his freedman to kill him. Weeks later, after a period of regrouping and minor skirmishes, the second engagement at Philippi took place. This time, the battle was more decisive. Brutus's army, though initially holding its ground, was eventually overwhelmed by the combined might and strategic leadership of Antony and Octavian. Were faced with utter defeat and the prospect of capture, Brutus, following the example of Cassius, took his own life. The Battle of Philippi was a monumental turning point in the Roman civil wars. With the deaths of Brutus and Cassius, the last significant proponents of the Old Republic and the primary assassins of Julius Caesar, were eliminated. The path was now clear for the triumvirs to consolidate their power without direct opposition from the Republican faction. The victory at Philippi secured Caesar's legacy, avenged his death, and signalled the irreversible decline of the Roman Republic, paving the way for a new era of imperial rule. With the Republican faction decisively crushed at Philippi, the uneasy alliance of the Second Triumvirate began to fray, its common enemy no longer uniting its ambitious members. The vast Roman world was divided amongst Octavian, Antony and Lepidus, each seeking to consolidate and expand his own influence. Lepidus, always the weakest of the three, was eventually marginalized and stripped of his power by Octavian in 36 BCE, reducing the triumvirate to a duumvirate. The focus of power then shifted to the two remaining titans, Octavian in the west and Mark Antony in the east. Octavian dedicated himself to solidifying his control over Italy and the western provinces, carefully cultivating his image as the restorer of peace and order. He worked to address the pressing issues of land distribution for veteran soldiers and maintained a strong presence in Rome. Meanwhile, Mark Antony immersed himself in the rich culture and politics of the East. His primary focus became the reorganization of the eastern provinces and the ambitious pursuit of a military campaign against Parthia, a long-standing Roman foe. During this period, his relationship with Cleopatra VII of Egypt deepened significantly. Their alliance, both political and personal, was viewed with increasing suspicion and alarm by Octavian and many in Rome. Antony's perceived abandonment of Roman traditions and his growing identification with Eastern monarchs, particularly through his children with Cleopatra, fueled Octavian's propaganda campaign against him. Tensions escalated steadily. Octavian skillfully portrayed Antony as a man corrupted by Eastern luxury and enslaved by Cleopatra's influence, thus suggesting that he intended to move the capital of the Roman Empire to Alexandria and bestow Roman territories upon his foreign queen and their offspring. This narrative resonated deeply with Roman fears of foreign domination and the erosion of their traditional values. The final rupture came in 32 BCE, when Octavian publicly revealed Antony's will, which allegedly contained provisions for burying Antony in Alexandria beside Cleopatra and bequeathing significant Roman territories to their children. This act, seen as a blatant betrayal of Rome, provided Octavian with the justification he needed to declare war, not directly on Antony, but on Cleopatra, thereby framing the conflict as a defense of Rome against a foreign threat. The climactic confrontation occurred in 31 BCE at the naval battle of Actium, off the western coast of Greece, though Octavian's forces, commanded by his skilled general Agrippa, faced the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra. The battle was long and fiercely contested, but eventually Cleopatra, sensing defeat, broke away with her ships, followed by Antony. Their flight demoralized their remaining forces, leading to a decisive victory for Octavian. The Battle of Actium effectively ended the civil wars that had plagued Rome for decades. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, where they were pursued by Octavian's forces. Both ultimately chose to take their own lives rather than face capture and humiliation. With their deaths, Octavian stood alone as the undisputed master of the Roman world, poised to usher in an unprecedented era of peace and stability under his sole rule. With Mark Antony and Cleopatra vanquished, the path to supreme authority lay open for Octavian. The long, tumultuous era of civil war which had consumed the Roman world for decades had finally drawn to a close. Octavian now stood as the sole remaining power, a position his adoptive father Julius Caesar had aspired to but never fully secured without meeting a violent end. Octavian, however, approached this moment with a profound understanding of Roman sensitivities and the lessons learned from Caesar's fate. He recognized that a direct declaration of monarchy would be met with fierce resistance, echoing the republican ideals that, though weakened, still resonated within the Roman psyche. Instead, Octavian embarked on a carefully orchestrated process of consolidating his power, presenting his actions not as a seizure of control, but as a restoration of the Republic. This subtle yet profound distinction was crucial to his success. In 27 BCE, a pivotal moment arrived. Octavian publicly announced his intention to lay down his extraordinary powers and restore the Republic to the Senate and the Roman people. This gesture, seemingly a selfless act of relinquishing authority, was a masterful stroke of political theatre. The Senate, in turn, begged him to retain his leadership, recognizing the stability he had brought after so much strife. They bestowed upon him the honorific title of Augustus, meaning revered or illustrious. This new name carried immense spiritual and political weight, elevating him above ordinary men without explicitly declaring him a king. Alongside the title of Augustus, he was granted Proconsular Imperium, giving him command over the most important frontier provinces and their legions, and tribunician power, which made his person sacrosanct and allowed him to veto any legislative act. Crucially, these powers were presented as traditional republican offices, albeit combined and held concurrently. masking the true extent of his singular authority. He maintained the outward forms of the Republic, the Senate, the assemblies, the magistracies, but their actual influence was significantly diminished. This period marked the formal end of the Roman Republic and the quiet, almost imperceptible birth of the Roman Empire. The transition was not violent or sudden, but a gradual, deliberate shift in the constitutional framework carefully managed by Augustus. He became the princeps, the first citizen, a title that conveyed preeminence rather than absolute rule. Yet in practice, he held ultimate authority over all aspects of Roman life. The weary Roman populace, exhausted by generations of civil conflict, largely welcomed this new era of peace, known as the Pax Romana, even if it meant sacrificing some of their traditional republican liberties. The foundations of a new imperial system were thus firmly laid, shaping the future of Rome for centuries to come. Julius Caesar's life, though cut short, cast an impossibly long shadow over the Roman world, fundamentally reshaping its trajectory in ways that few individuals before or since have managed. His ambitious spirit, his unparalleled military genius, and his shrewd political manoeuvring collectively served as a crucible that forged the destiny of Rome from a struggling republic into a burgeoning empire. The ramifications of his actions rippled through generations, setting precedents that would define the Roman state for centuries. One of Caesar's most profound legacies lay in his military innovations. He commanded with an audacious brilliance that inspired unwavering loyalty in his legions. His tactics, his speed, and his ability to adapt to diverse terrains and adversaries established new benchmarks for military leadership. Beyond the battlefield, his reforms within the army, such as improving pay and benefits for soldiers and veterans, created a professional fighting force deeply devoted to its commander rather than to the distant ideals of the Republic. This shift in allegiance paved the way for future generals to wield armies as personal instruments of power, a critical factor in the subsequent civil wars and the rise of the emperors. Politically, Caesar demonstrated an uncanny ability to navigate the complex and often treacherous currents of Roman society. His relentless pursuit of power, his willingness to challenge established norms, and his skillful manipulation of public sentiment exposed the inherent weaknesses and contradictions within the late Republic. By systematically accumulating offices and titles, by extending Roman citizenship to provincials, and by initiating vast public works projects, he demonstrated a vision of a centralized, unified Roman state that transcended the old aristocratic factions. Though his dictatorial tendencies alarmed many traditionalists, his actions inadvertently provided a blueprint for future rulers seeking to consolidate authority. His political style, characterized by populism and a direct appeal to the masses, bypassed the traditional senatorial elite, creating a new model of leadership that relied less on aristocratic consensus and more on personal charisma and popular support. This approach, while controversial, offered a glimpse into a different form of governance for a vast and expanding empire. The reforms he initiated, such as the Julian calendar, were not merely practical improvements, but symbols of his comprehensive vision for Rome. He sought to impose order and efficiency on a system that had grown unwieldy and corrupt. Even his assassination, intended to restore the Republic, paradoxically served to accelerate its demise, yet as creating a power vacuum that ultimately led to the rise of his adopted son, Octavian, who, as Augustus, would formalize the very imperial system that Caesar had so clearly prefigured. Thus, Caesar's life, in its entirety, became an irreversible turning point, permanently altering the character of Roman governance and laying the indispensable groundwork for the grand Roman Empire. Among the most remarkable testaments to Julius Caesar's enduring impact is the transformation of his very name into a title of supreme authority. The personal cognomen, Caesar, once belonging to a specific branch of the esteemed Julian family, transcended its origins to become synonymous with imperial power itself. This semantic evolution began almost immediately after his death and profoundly shaped the nomenclature of leadership for millennia. His adopted son, Octavian, understood the immense symbolic weight carried by the name. By adopting Gaius Julius Caesar as his own, Octavian not only claimed a powerful lineage, but also strategically linked himself to the charisma and legacy of his revered predecessor. This adoption was a crucial step in his ascent to becoming the first Roman Emperor Augustus. Subsequent emperors of the Julio-Claudian dynasty proudly bore Caesar as part of their official titles, signifying their direct or perceived connection to the founder of the imperial system. Over time, Caesar transitioned from a personal name to a formal imperial designation. It was initially used to denote the heir apparent or junior emperor, distinguishing them from the senior Augustus. This practice solidified its status as a marker of imperial rank and succession within the Roman Empire. The name became a powerful emblem of legitimacy, linking each successive ruler back to the foundational figure who had irrevocably altered the course of Roman history. The influence of Caesar did not remain confined within the borders of the Roman Empire. As Rome's power and cultural reach extended, so too did the symbolic resonance of the name. In the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire, the title Caesar continued to be used, maintaining its association with imperial authority, albeit in a different linguistic form. Perhaps even more remarkably, the name Caesar journeyed far beyond the direct successor states of Rome, embedding itself in the political lexicon of entirely separate cultures and empires. In the Germanic world, yet the title evolved into Kaiser, becoming the designation for the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire and later, the German Empire. Similarly, in the Slavic world, the name transformed into Tsar or Tsar, which was the official title for the rulers of the Russian Empire. This widespread adoption across diverse languages and political systems underscores the extraordinary symbolic power that Julius Caesar's name came to embody. It transcended the individual man to represent the very concept of supreme, centralized rule. The continued use of Caesar, Kaiser, and Tsar through centuries across continents and within vastly different political structures stands as a quiet yet profound testament to the enduring and almost mythical status of Julius Caesar. His name became a legacy, a title, a whispered echo of the man who forever changed Rome. Julius Caesar's enduring fame rests significantly upon his unparalleled military genius. His campaigns were not merely a series of battles, but a masterful display of strategic brilliance, tactical innovation, and an almost supernatural ability to inspire fierce loyalty in his legions. From the dense forests of Gaul to the sun-baked plains of Pharsalus, Caesar demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of warfare that set him apart from his contemporaries. His strategic mind was characterized by audacious planning and swift execution. Caesar often sought to seize the initiative, surprising his enemies with rapid marches and unexpected maneuvers. He understood the psychological impact of speed and decisiveness, frequently achieving victory by denying his opponents the time to consolidate their forces or prepare their defences. The campaigns in Gaul, meticulously documented in his own commentaries, offer countless examples of this strategic foresight, where he continually outmaneuvered a multitude of Celtic tribes, often fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Tactically, Caesar was a brilliant improviser and innovator. He was not rigidly bound by conventional Roman military doctrine, but adapted his methods to suit the terrain, the enemy, and the immediate circumstances. His construction of the circumvallation and contravallation lines around Alesia, trapping Vercingetorix's forces while simultaneously fending off a massive Gallic relief army, remains a stunning example of military engineering and tactical ingenuity. He also understood the importance of combined arms, effectively integrating cavalry, infantry, and even siege engines to achieve his objectives. Beyond his technical prowess, Caesar possessed an extraordinary capacity for leadership. He cultivated a deep personal bond with his soldiers, sharing their hardships, knowing many by name, and frequently leading from the front. This personal engagement fostered an unwavering loyalty that transcended mere military discipline. His troops, often outnumbered and facing formidable odds, consistently fought with a devotion that bordered on fanaticism, a testament to their profound trust and admiration for their commander. They were Caesar's 10th Legion, a fighting force renowned throughout the Roman world, defined by their unwavering commitment to their general. Furthermore, Caesar's own writings, the Commentari de Bello Gallico and Commentari de Bello Civili, serve as invaluable primary sources and literary masterpieces. Presented as objective third-person accounts, these works not only chronicle his military exploits, but also subtly articulate his strategic rationale, his leadership philosophy, and his perception of the political landscape. They are a direct window into the mind of a military commander who understood the power of narrative as much as the power of the sword, ensuring his version of events would shape posterity's understanding of his genius. These commentaries stand as a lasting testament to a mind that was as adept with the pen as it was with the sword. Beyond the battlefield, Julius Caesar possessed a formidable political acumen and a captivating charisma that allowed him to navigate the intricate and often perilous landscape of Roman politics. His rise was not solely due to military might, but also to a profound understanding of power, an ability to forge strategic alliances, and a singular talent for winning popular support. Caesar's political journey began with a clear recognition of the importance of public opinion. Unlike many patricians who focused solely on senatorial backing, he actively cultivated the favour of the Roman populace. Through lavish games, public feasts, and generous distributions of grain, he endeared himself to the common citizens, earning their loyalty and creating a powerful base of support that often counteracted the conservative opposition in the Senate. However, this populist approach was a calculated strategy, demonstrating his understanding that true power in Rome ultimately rested on the consent of the people. His skill in forging alliances was equally remarkable. Early in his career, he formed the first triumvirate, an informal but potent political alliance with two of the most powerful men in Rome, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, a celebrated general, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. This strategic partnership allowed Caesar to overcome significant political obstacles, securing his first consulship and later the extraordinary command in Gaul. This alliance, though ultimately fragile, showcased his ability to identify common interests and unite disparate forces for mutual benefit, even if temporarily. Caesar's personal charisma was legendary. He possessed a natural charm and engaging personality that drew people to him. Accounts from his contemporaries speak of his magnetic presence, his quick wit, and his ability to connect with individuals from all walks of life. Whether addressing a crowd in the forum, negotiating with fellow senators, or simply conversing with a friend, Caesar exuded an aura of confidence and intelligence that was difficult to resist. This charisma was not merely superficial, it was rooted in a genuine intellectual curiosity and a capacity for empathy that allowed him to understand and influence the motivations of others. His persuasive oratory was another key component of his political arsenal. Though few of his speeches survive in their entirety, ancient sources attest to his powerful speaking style. He was clear, concise, and direct, and capable of articulating complex ideas in a way that resonated with both the educated elite and the common citizen. His words could sway public opinion, rally support for his proposals, and effectively counter the arguments of his political adversaries. This combination of strategic alliances, popular appeal, captivating charisma, and powerful oratory allowed Julius Caesar to ascend to unprecedented levels of power, reshaping the very fabric of the Roman Republic. The legacy of Julius Caesar remains a subject of profound contemplation, inviting us to consider a complex tapestry of achievements and transgressions. Was he truly a saviour, a figure who brought desperately needed order to a republic teetering on the brink of collapse? Or was he a ruthless tyrant dismantling ancient freedoms and paving the way for autocratic rule? The answer, as with many figures of such magnitude, is rarely simple, residing in shades of grey rather than stark black and white. From one perspective, Caesar can be seen as a visionary leader who recognized the inherent flaws and systemic corruption plaguing the late Roman Republic. The institutions designed for a city-state were struggling to govern an expanding empire, leading to perpetual civil strife, economic disparity, and political paralysis. Caesar's reforms, such as the reorganization of the calendar, the regulation of grain distribution, and his ambitious building programs, aim to address these deep-seated issues, bringing stability and efficiency to a fractured state. His benevolent treatment of conquered peoples and his efforts to extend Roman citizenship offered a pathway to integration and reduced provincial unrest. In this light, his actions, though perhaps unconventional, were ultimately for the greater good of Rome, a necessary intervention to prevent its complete disintegration. However, an alternative perspective paints a more sombre picture. Caesar's ascent to power involved a blatant disregard for traditional republican norms and laws. His crossing of the Rubicon, an act of open rebellion against the Senate, marked a point of no return for the Republic. His subsequent accumulation of extraordinary powers, including the dictatorship for life, effectively stripped the Senate of its authority and undermined the very principles of shared governance that had defined Rome for centuries. Critics argue that he prioritized personal ambition over the collective good, and using his military might and popular support to dismantle the Republic's fragile democratic institutions. His actions, from this viewpoint, were not merely reforms, but a calculated seizure of power, leading inevitably to the imperial system that followed. The historical record offers evidence for both interpretations, inviting a gentle contemplation of the forces at play. Did Caesar's ambition merely coincide with Rome's need for a strong hand? Or did his ambition actively create the conditions for the Republic's downfall? He undeniably brought a period of relative peace and stability after decades of civil war, yet this peace came at the cost of Republican ideals. His enduring impact on Roman history is undeniable, yet whether he was a hero who rescued Rome from itself, or a tyrant who irrevocably altered its destiny remains a question for quiet reflection. The compelling narrative of Julius Caesar has transcended the boundaries of historical accounts, finding a vibrant and enduring life within the realms of literature and art across the centuries. His dramatic rise and fall, his intricate character, and the profound implications of his actions have captivated the imaginations of countless artists, inspiring an immense body of work that continues to resonate. Perhaps the most famous literary interpretation of Caesar's story is William Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar, penned around the turn of the 17th century. Shakespeare masterfully explores the moral dilemmas, political intrigues, and human frailties surrounding the assassination, though through memorable characters like the conflicted Brutus, the ambitious Cassius, and the cunning Mark Antony, the play delves into themes of honour, loyalty, ambition, and the very nature of political power. It is here that phrases such as "et tu, Brute" became immortalized, shaping the popular understanding of Caesar's final moments and the betrayal he faced. Shakespeare's portrayal, while taking dramatic liberties, powerfully encapsulates the tension between republican ideals and the rise of autocratic rule, making Caesar a central figure in the Western literary canon. Beyond Shakespeare, Caesar's life has been a rich source for poets, novelists, and playwrights through various epochs. From classical retellings that emphasized his military prowess to more modern psychological studies of his character, each generation has found new ways to interpret his complex persona. Medieval chroniclers often viewed him through a lens of chivalry, while Enlightenment thinkers debated his impact on liberty. In the visual arts, Caesar has been a frequent subject, appearing in sculptures, paintings, and mosaics since antiquity. Roman busts and statues sought to capture his authoritative presence and distinctive features, often idealizing his image. Renaissance and Baroque artists depicted scenes from his life, from his triumphs in Gaul to his fateful assassination, using his story to explore themes of power, destiny, and human tragedy. Later painters continued to be drawn to the dramatic potential of his narrative, portraying key moments with vivid intensity. The enduring fascination with Caesar in literature and art speaks to the timeless nature of his story. It is a tale rich with ambition, betrayal, love, war, and political upheaval, offering fertile ground for exploring universal human experiences. Through these artistic and literary lenses, Julius Caesar ceases to be merely a historical figure and transforms into a powerful symbol, a recurring motif in the collective human imagination, prompting continuous reflection on leadership, power, and the course of history itself. His story continues to inspire, to provoke, and to entertain, ensuring his presence remains vibrant in the cultural consciousness. Beneath the monumental achievements and the enduring legend there was, of course, a man, Julius Caesar, stripped of the layers of historical interpretation and artistic embellishment, yet possessed a distinctive human character, a unique blend of strengths and vulnerabilities that shaped his extraordinary path. Understanding the man behind the legend offers a more nuanced appreciation of his impact. At his core, Caesar was driven by an immense and unyielding ambition. This was not merely a desire for power for its own sake, but seemingly an inner conviction that he was destined for greatness, that he possessed the capacity to lead Rome out of its turbulent times. This ambition fueled his relentless pursuit of military glory and political office, pushing him to overcome numerous obstacles and setbacks. It was an ambition that, at times, bordered on hubris, leading him to dismiss warnings and perhaps overestimate the loyalty of those around him. Intellectually, Caesar was extraordinarily gifted. His writings, particularly his commentaries on the Gallic Wars, reveal a keen strategic mind, a master of clear and concise prose, and a highly organized thinker. He possessed a remarkable capacity for learning, from rhetoric and philosophy to military tactics and engineering. This intellectual prowess allowed him to grasp complex situations quickly, devise innovative solutions, and articulate his vision persuasively, whether addressing his troops or the Roman Senate. His courage, both physical and moral, was undeniable. On the battlefield he led from the front, sharing the dangers and hardships of his soldiers, earning their profound respect and devotion. He faced political opposition with an unwavering resolve, never shrinking from confrontation. This bravery, however, could also manifest as a certain recklessness, a willingness to gamble on high stakes, trusting in his own judgment and fortune. Yet Caesar was also a man of considerable charm and charisma. He possessed an uncanny ability to connect with people from all walks of life, from the common soldier to the most powerful senator. His generosity, his clemency towards defeated enemies, and his engaging personality all contributed to his broad appeal. He cultivated loyalty not just through fear or reward, but through genuine personal connection. His flaws were perhaps intrinsically linked to his strengths. His ambition, while propelling him to greatness, ultimately led to his downfall. His self-confidence, while inspiring, may have blinded him to the depth of resentment among some of the Roman elite. His pursuit of glory, while beneficial for Rome in some ways, also contributed to the erosion of republican traditions. In the end, Julius Caesar was a complex individual, a figure of contradictions and immense human scale. He was a brilliant strategist, a charismatic leader, a gifted writer, and a man driven by an insatiable desire to shape the world around him. Recognizing the human element within the legendary figure allows for a deeper understanding of his triumphs, his tragedies, and his lasting imprint on history. The life and actions of Julius Caesar, though unfolding across the distant tapestry of ancient Rome, cast long and discernible shadows into the very fabric of subsequent political thought and leadership. His precedents, both intentional and unforeseen, continue to resonate, shaping discussions around governance, authority, and realm, and the delicate balance between individual power and collective rule. One of the most profound echoes of Caesar's life lies in his impact on the concept of centralized power. Faced with a republic increasingly paralyzed by factionalism, corruption, and civil strife, Caesar, through a combination of military force and political maneuvering, consolidated immense authority into his own hands. His actions, while ultimately contributing to the demise of the Republic, also demonstrated a pathway to stability through strong singular leadership. This model, where a single individual holds sway over the state's apparatus, became a recurring theme in later political structures, from the Roman Empire itself to various monarchies and authoritarian regimes throughout history. The very idea of a leader who can cut through political gridlock and impose order, even at the expense of traditional freedoms, finds a powerful, if controversial, antecedent in Caesar. Debates about the necessity of a strong hand versus the virtues of democratic process often implicitly or explicitly invoke the historical tension that Caesar embodied. Was he a necessary dictator, bringing peace and efficient administration, or a tyrannical usurper, destroying the foundations of liberty? This question, first posed in ancient Rome, continues to be rephrased and re-examined in countless political contexts, from nascent democracies to established republics. Furthermore, Caesar's strategic use of popular support, bypassing traditional aristocratic channels, is established a blueprint for leaders seeking to derive their legitimacy directly from the populace. His understanding of public sentiment, his distribution of land and grain, and his grand public works projects were all methods to forge a bond with the common people, thereby strengthening his personal authority. This populist approach, where a leader appeals directly to the masses, often against an established elite, is a tactic that has been employed and analysed across millennia, demonstrating the enduring relevance of Caesar's political acumen. Even the terminology associated with Caesar, such as Caesarism, speaks to this lasting influence. It describes a political system characterized by an authoritarian leader, often a military figure who seizes power, typically with popular support, and rules through personal command rather than established legal or constitutional processes. This concept, though refined and debated over centuries, directly stems from the historical precedent set by Julius Caesar himself. Thus, the principles and precedents established by Caesar continue to provide a rich historical laboratory for examining the complex interplay between leadership, power, and the evolution of political systems. His life remains a touchstone for understanding the allure and the perils of centralized authority, echoing through the corridors of political thought even to the present day. The journey through Julius Caesar's life reveals a figure whose existence, though confined to a specific era, unleashed forces that would reshape the course of human history in ways both immediate and enduring. His actions, driven by a potent mix of ambition and vision, did not merely alter the trajectory of the Roman Republic, they fundamentally reconfigured the foundations of an entire civilization, leaving an indelible mark that continues to resonate across millennia. At the most immediate level, Caesar's life irrevocably transformed the Roman world. He found a republic fractured by internal strife, and left behind a society on the precipice of empire. While his assassination was intended to restore the old order, it inadvertently accelerated the very transformation it sought to prevent. The chaos that followed his death ultimately paved the way for his adopted son, Octavian, to consolidate power and establish the Principate, ushering in the Pax Romana and the long imperial age. Caesar's genius, his reforms, and his very name became intertwined with this new imperial identity, a title that would signify supreme authority for centuries to come. Beyond the political restructuring, Caesar's conquests profoundly expanded Rome's dominion, bringing new territories and peoples under its influence. His campaigns in Gaul, for instance, not only secured Rome's northern borders, but also brought Roman law, language, and culture to regions that would form the bedrock of modern France and parts of Western Europe. The cultural diffusion initiated by his military victories laid down deep roots that continue to define the linguistic and legal landscapes of many European nations. His intellectual contributions, though sometimes overshadowed by his military prowess, also had a lasting impact. The Julian calendar, a meticulous reform of the Roman dating system, was adopted across the Roman world and, with minor modifications, remains the basis of the calendar we use today. This seemingly practical adjustment speaks to his comprehensive approach to governance and his desire for order and efficiency. The narrative of Caesar's life itself, a tale of daring campaigns, political genius, and dramatic betrayal, has transcended its historical context to become a foundational story within Western culture. It has shaped literary traditions, inspired countless works of art, and provided a recurring archetype for the powerful leader, the tragic hero, and the ambitious statesman. His story, therefore, is not merely a chronicle of events. It is a profound exploration of human nature, power, and destiny that has captivated and informed generations. In essence, Julius Caesar's life was a pivotal axis around which the ancient world turned. His decisions, his triumphs, and even his ultimate demise collectively forged an empire, disseminated a civilization, and bequeathed a legacy that continues to shape our understanding of leadership, governance, and the very course of human progress. As the echoes of Caesar's extraordinary journey begin to gently recede, we find ourselves at the quiet close of this historical contemplation. We have traversed vast landscapes of time, from the bustling streets of ancient Rome to the distant battlefields of Gaul, witnessing the rise and fall of a figure whose very name became synonymous with power and transformation. This immersive voyage through the annals of a momentous life has, perhaps, allowed the mind to drift peacefully, absorbing the grand sweep of history in a tranquil state. The stories of the past, like the gentle currents of a slow-moving river, continue to flow, shaping the contours of the present in subtle and profound ways. Julius Caesar's life, with its intricate tapestry of ambition, intellect, and sheer will, stands as a testament to the enduring human capacity for both greatness and complexity. His decisions, his triumphs, and his ultimate demise didn't merely conclude a personal narrative. They set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of Western civilization. Allow these historical resonances to settle softly within you, as the day's concerns begin to fade into the quietude of the approaching night. The grand narratives of antiquity, filled with their struggles and their triumphs, offer a unique perspective, reminding us of the cyclical nature of power, the ebb and flow of human endeavour, and the persistent human drive to shape destiny. These reflections are not meant to stir, but rather to soothe, to provide a gentle intellectual landscape for the mind to wander as it prepares for rest. The distant drumbeats of Roman legions, the hushed whispers of senatorial debates, the rustle of parchment recording decrees, these sounds from a bygone era now mingle with the tranquil silence of your surroundings. The weight of history, once a vibrant, active force, now transforms into a calming presence, a backdrop against which your own peaceful repose can unfold. May the intricate details of Caesar's world, the strategies, the reforms, the very names of the places he touched now dissolve into a soft, indistinct hum. Let the quiet contemplation of a life that spanned such a significant epoch guide you towards a restorative sleep. The past, in its unfolding, has offered its wisdom and its stories. Now it gently invites you to release all thought, to embrace the stillness, and to drift into the profound peace of undisturbed rest. The vastness of Roman history, with its monumental figures and sweeping sagas, now begins to recede into the soft edges of your awareness. The intricate details, the names, the dates, the triumphs and the challenges of Julius Caesar's world are gently dissolving, like mist lifting from an ancient landscape. There is no need to hold on to any specific point, no requirement to recall any particular event. Simply allow the grand, overarching sense of the past to envelop you in its tranquil embrace. Imagine the quiet stillness that must have fallen over Rome at the close of a long day, the distant murmurs of the city fading into the night. That same profound peace now extends to you. The weight of the centuries which we have explored together transforms into a comforting blanket, a gentle reminder of the enduring nature of time and the quiet perpetuity of human experience. Feel your breath deepening, becoming softer, more rhythmic. Each gentle exhalation carries away any lingering tension, any stray thought that might still cling to the mind. The journey through Caesar's life, a tapestry woven with ambition and destiny, has now reached its peaceful conclusion. The echoes of his world, once so vivid, now blend into the stillness, guiding you effortlessly towards a state of profound relaxation. Allow your body to sink further into the surface beneath you, feeling its complete support. The mind, having travelled through empires and across battlefields, now finds its own quiet harbour. The great figures of history, including Caesar himself, now rest in their own timeless slumber, their stories preserved in the quiet dignity of the past. There is nothing left to do, nowhere left to go, but inward, into the serene depths of your own tranquillity. The grand narratives of Rome, the rise of its empire, the legacy of its leaders, all these magnificent elements now serve as a soft lullaby, a gentle passage into the realm of dreams. Let the quiet authority of history, the steady march of time, and the enduring power of these ancient tales carry you into a deep and restorative sleep. May your rest be peaceful, undisturbed, and profoundly refreshing as the echoes of the past softly fade into the quietude of your own personal night.